that yes, there of course are difficult conversations to be had domestically, but the amount of GDP that the US committing to support Ukraine is nowhere near as much as countries like Lithuania are using. You know,
but
countries
you
like
seriously
Estonia.
think American politicians, particularly in a presidential election year, are going to listen to people like you?
I hope they do, and in the past I've been able to have very blunt conversations. In fact, last time I went to DC, I remember my American counterpart saying, guys, if the Brits are saying this, we should be listening. And we saw only a few weeks later more agreements made to support Ukraine. We do not have a choice. Ukraine is fighting for all of our freedoms. Let's not repeat the mistakes. I saw yesterday the transcript of a conversation between Yeltsin and Clinton, way back when Yalta happened, where he said, give Europe to Russia. They're making the same asks now. We cannot allow this to continue, this irredentist foreign policy that we are seeing a rise of. We're seeing the same thing in the Balkans and we're repeating the same mistakes of the 90s. We have to stand by Ukraine. It's not an option.
Well, you say that, but the reality on the ground is that Vladimir Putin believes he can outlast the West.
Yes.
The West is full of complex democracies. Vladimir Putin, as we will see this year when he gets re-elected with at least probably 80% of the vote, Vladimir Putin doesn't really have to worry about public opinion at home. Isn't that the strength of not just his authoritarian regime, but other regimes that you've spent a great deal of time analysing? I'm thinking in particular of your concerns about China. There is a strength to that strand of authoritarianism which we judge against sometimes the weakness and the vulnerability of the democracies like the one that you sit in.
There is no question, particularly when it comes to foreign policy. Autocrats have the endurance, they have the durability, but also they have the ability to throw a whole-of-state effort at whatever they want with no interest as to the cost to their people or the cost to their, their interests and assets.
I mean, you want to believe that democracies have levers that can overcome that authoritarian strength. I mean, I'm mindful that you are the politician who said, quote, on March 2022, just after the invasion of Ukraine by Putin, you said Russia is now going to feel the, quote, titanic force of the West's economic muscle. Well, you were sort of wrong, weren't you? The Russian economy actually grew last year, and sanctions are clearly not working.
So I think sanctions are working in some way, but where we failed is that there is currently too much sanctions evasion taking place in Central Asia, for example. Russia has been able to rebuild its defence industrial capability, and that is where it's building its economy. But we have seen mass migration away from Russia. We have seen reduced confidence in Putin, but we have to go further. And that is why before the NATO meeting in DC, I do want to see a plan for how we're going to seize Russian assets. It should be Russian frozen assets paying for not only the defeat of Russia, but the rebuilding of Ukraine. So it's not easy, and democracies will always struggle and have a harder time to do this. But I believe it's our duty to redouble our efforts and keep working harder. And you have seen, I mean, we gave, with 3 Storm Shadow British missiles, the Ukrainians have managed to force a retreat yet again by Putin's fleets. We are seeing them push back. We are seeing progress in the navals. It was never going to be easy.
Sure, but they're now suffering from severe ammunition shortages, and even their air defences are being badly stretched by Putin's continued determination to lob missiles into Ukraine. The fact is, whichever way you look at it, Russia, China, they have a strategic determination which is lacking in the West.
So I don't think the determination is lacking, but it is more difficult for us. But imagine if we hadn't helped Ukraine. Imagine where we'd be now in terms of Moldova. Imagine where we'd be in terms of Poland. Imagine where we could be with other neighbouring countries. The fact that Ukraine is still largely independent against one of the biggest militaries in the world is a sign of Western resolve. So yes, I will keep fighting, because that's my duty, to make sure we don't forget Ukraine, we don't stop fighting Ukraine. I'll be taking my committee, I hope, at some point to Ukraine this year.
And if this year of elections includes an election in November in the United States which sees Donald Trump re-elected, then politicians like you telling me that yes, you can wield influence in Washington, well, that influence is going to disappear very quickly, isn't it?
It becomes more difficult, but I don't think the influence of the UK disappears. I mean, for example, Trump did give weapons to Ukraine, despite the fact that nobody thought he would do so. Now, I am no Trump supporter, and when I go around capitals and the conversations I have with world leaders is, what are we doing now so that we aren't sat here saying, well, what happens with the Donald Trump victory? Stop giving Ukraine enough to survive the next 3 months or 6 months. We wouldn't do that to a business, let alone a country at war defending our values. Give them enough to win, and that's difficult, and we will have to make difficult compromises at home, like the Estonians, who gave every single howitzer they had. We have to make decisions, and it's difficult, But this is not one where we can fail to have that resolve.
A quick thought about you and your personal situation, given your determination to confront what you call authoritarian regime terror around the world. You've talked about the cyber attacks that come from Russia and indeed from China. You've talked about China being a hostile state, which the UK government needs to take much more seriously. And there have even been stories in the press about spying sponsored by China, which has reached the House of Parliament itself, perhaps, according to some as yet unproven allegations, been conducted inside your own office. So you know all too well a price that can be paid if you take on these regimes. How has it affected you personally?
So when I stood for election, I think I said in my maiden speech, I will always be a voice for those who others seek to silence. And I think we in Britain have a privilege of being able to be a voice that is heard around the world.
Do you believe you've been spied on?
I know I've been spied on, whether it be cyber attacks on my emails at work, which have come from both Russia and from China, whether it be other attempts that I've been made aware of.
Human intelligence? Because we know of those allegations that swirled just a few months ago about your office being a target, and that one particular individual who's adamantly denied any knowledge of it, but one individual was accused of spying on the premises of Westminster.
So I've always been very honest and transparent about everything, but obviously when there's an active police investigation, I just cannot put that at risk, and I'm not going to do that. But there is no question, I was put on a no-fly list to Russia even before I was an MP, when I was working at the Foreign Office training the Ukrainians how to counter Russian disinformation and working against Russia's interests in Syria. The Chinese have been very clear as to their view on me. There have been all sorts of comments. The Serbian president threatened me back in June. This is what happens. But I'm very fortunate, because when these people try to attack me, the physical threat is not as high as it is to those within their own countries, and therefore I do have a duty to be brave, and it is, of course, it's difficult at times.
Just a final thought, and it's about British politics. You represent the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party is lagging in the polls, and to say lagging is to put it politely. It looks as though the party could be almost wiped out at the next election, which is going to come within pretty much the next calendar year. It's bound to. In response, it looks like the party is tempted to lurch to a sort of new brand of populism, perhaps best signified by this idea that the government wants to send illegal entrants, migrants into the country, to Rwanda rather than have their asylum claims processed in the United Kingdom itself. Are you a supporter of that policy?
So I don't support the Rwanda policy, and I've been very outspoken about that, because I don't believe that it is a safe country for certain types of asylum seekers.
Do you believe that a sort of nationalist, populist message that we've seen in some other European countries, from Italy to the Netherlands, maybe we're going to see it soon in Germany too, is that a pathway to success for the British Conservative Party?
No, in my perspective it's not, but I'm a proud One Nation Conservative, so I want to see us stand solidly on our conservative values, but also grab that centre. That is how you win power in this country, and I am a sensible, moderate One Nation Conservative. That's where I want my party to go, and I'm going to work my hardest to make sure that happens.
Alicia Kearns, we have to end there, but thank you for joining me on Hard Talk.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Jeff Goods. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba. It's the calm after the storm yesterday, and lots of snow down there. It actually has improved traction in some ways underfoot and on the roadways. But thanks for joining us this morning. It'll be less eventful than yesterday weather-wise. Ice crystals out there. It is cold, though. It's minus 21 right now in downtown Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. That's where we're sitting, and you're listening to CBC Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the CBC Listen app with your morning show. You also might be tuned in on YouTube. 3 minutes to 6 a.m. I mentioned the temperature. So where are we going today? Well, we'll be around minus 17 degrees, mix of sun and cloud, and with extreme wind chills in parts of Manitoba, including Flin Flon, Leaf, and Puck up north, and to southwest Manitoba, Brandon, right through Winnipeg goes to Dauphin, Russell, and Riding Mountain National Park. Wind chills in those areas could be around minus 50 on exposed exposed skin. So there's an extreme cold warning for those regions. Let's say good morning to everyone who's here. Mr. Abby Adeyemi will be covering weather and is also our technical producer on the show. Mr. Corey Funk, good morning to you. Corey directs the show and covers the commute. And behind the controls of our YouTube channel this morning, Travis Peterson and Brad Lillies. Heather Wells is here as well and has an update on the news to start, as always. Hi, Heath.
Good morning. Well, 2023 was a banner year for coyote sightings in Manitoba. Conservation officers logged almost 700 reports of interactions with coyotes last year. That's more than double reported in 2022. And 2 of the reports, you may recall, involved children who were attacked in the North Kildonan area. We're going to hear from an expert about why this might be happening coming up and what you should do. And it is a franchise record of 8 straight wins for the Winnipeg Jets after coming back to beat Chicago last night. We're going to hear from some fans coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, you might be watching us this morning on a treadmill. Maybe you're out at a gym. We're going to hear today from Marketplace in the first hour of the show. We'll hear part of it on World Report and then have a full interview on this. They are tackling germs on gym equipment today. That's this week's episode. So we'll find out what they discovered in their investigation and their swabbing. So plan breakfast accordingly. That's coming up right around 6:20 this morning. In addition, we begin the show this morning talking about puppies that are in need of adoption in the community. The Humane Society said they're packed to the brim. So stay tuned. We'll have that for you as well.
On Cue with Tom Power. Jeff McFetridge is not a household name, but I bet you've come across his work, maybe in a gallery or on your Apple Watch or your Nike shoes. Jeff McFetridge will tell you how he keeps his integrity as an artist while doing...
Hi, Glenn. How are you?
Hey, good, Marcy. How are you?
I'm good. '70s and 1980s. He advocated for social...
pediatric nurses.
Phil Shaddock, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally, recapping our top story, Houthi rebels say they will retaliate for U.S. and U.K. attacks on their military sites in Yemen. The airstrikes hit about 60 targets in more than a dozen locations and are in response to Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis say it's in support of Hamas with its war with Israel, and they vow attacks on ships in the region will continue. Well, that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. Thanks so much for joining us. The show's on until 8:37 a.m. Let's get started with Hour 1. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app this morning. And wow, what a day yesterday. The snow blew through really early and then actually was visibility challenged through the day. But this morning, lots of shoveling and sanding and clearing has already been done. So you should have a straight ahead winter day, I think, here in Winnipeg. Very cold, though, to parts of the north and southwest. More weather in a moment. This hour on the show, if you've been thinking about adopting a puppy, now could be the time. The Humane Society locally says it's packed to the brim with puppies. They need people to help them out. We'll talk about next whether or not your family might be a fit with one of the pups. And we're going to talk more about that marketplace investigation. Put down the breakfast. We're going to hear about germs on gym equipment. So stay tuned for that. Charles Iagro is going to join us for an interview today in this first hour about their investigation. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for updates on news and headlines. Hi there.
Hi there. Well, a Winnipeg woman is fighting City Hall after she says she's been saddled with a bill of more than $100,000 because of multiple fires in her vacant home. Maria Suzuki has been hit with 3 bills from the city for 4 fires caused by arson at her Elgin Avenue property. Last year, the city started charging empty building owners the costs of firefighting. And the Winnipeg branch of the Animal Food Bank Network is desperate for donations. Nicole Frey, founder of the network, says they've had double the amount of requests for help than normal in just the past week, and she worries they won't be able to keep up. We'll hear more about that in our next local news at 6:30.
Heather Wells.
Hi.
I thought we were going to get more snow than was, forecasting that Alberta Clipper system because we got so much when we were on the air at this time yesterday morning, right?
Oh, man.
But it kind of did taper off and then just end up being the rest of the day calm and time for cleanup.
And it was kind of actually a nice day yesterday, strangely.
Yeah, I agree with you. So this morning, it is bright and white and cold out there with all the snow down. So Abby Adeyemi's in with our forecast. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Marcy. Right now, Winnipeg, we are currently at minus 21 degrees with ice crystals. As we navigate through the day, to expect a shift in the weather because we'll be seeing a mix of sun and cloud, but the clouds will take over around noon, and the high we're looking for today is a chilly minus 17 degrees. And due to the current wind conditions, it actually feels like minus 39, and there's a risk of frostbite. So I'd advise people to bundle up. Also, from our friends at Environment Canada, we have a special weather statement of extreme cold warning for southern Manitoba, and they say there's a multi-day episode of very cold wind chills expected today, and it's going to be ranging from the chills of like minus 50 to minus 40, and the areas they mentioned, Brandon, Nipor, Carberry, Killarney, Pilot Mount, all the way down to Riding Mountain National Park, and they say this is going to be on from like today till Monday morning. So we're looking at a cold weekend with chills because of this Arctic air that is passing through right now. So I'd advise people to take care. And also there's extreme cold warning for northern Manitoba also, because they said this chills is expected, and it's going to be feeling like from minus 50 to minus 40. And this started yesterday, and it's going to happen all the way through till Saturday. And this extreme cold warning, according to Environment Canada, is going to be putting a lot of people at risk. So you need to to take care out there. But right now in Winnipeg, we are at minus 21 degrees.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, I bet you had a brisk run in this morning.
Yep, sure did. I layered up like an onion this morning. It was, I don't know why I didn't think that it would be super cold this morning. I looked, I'm like, oh shoot, I'm putting on I think I had 5 layers on.
Having said that, I remarked on the traction from my point of view. How was it for you running in?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Actually, the sidewalks, at least through kind of Wolseley and West Broadway there, actually, they were all cleared. So it was just lovely traction all the way in. My face hurt a little bit, but other than that, it was actually quite a nice little run to work this morning. If you're on the roads, though, things seem to also be fairly clear so far. I actually got a call from Tim, who's coming from Matlock, so taking Highway 8 and Highway 9. He said it was actually quite clear all the way in. He was able to go the speed limit, wasn't worried at all about conditions. So that's good news. Things seem to be improving so far on the highways. But if it's not where you are, anywhere in the province, or if you're here in Winnipeg, give me a call what you're seeing on the streets. If you're walking, biking, driving, would love to hear what you're seeing, particularly what's going on in the bike lanes. How well plowed are those? Give me an update. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Oh, well, let's start with a little bit of cuteness overload this morning. I'm looking at the Winnipeg Humane Society's website right now and available pets, and some of them have names like Cannelloni, a 9-week-old little female puppy, or Tortellini, who happens to be a 9-week-old little male dog. To start the show this morning, if you've been looking to add a new fuzzy member to your family, you do have a chance. The Humane Society, Winnipeg Humane Society, is overrun right now with dogs. But this time it is puppies that are in need of a new home, as I outlined just names of a couple of the little cutie patooties. Daphne He is with us this morning, adoption manager at the Humane Society. Good morning, Daphne.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
So how unusual is it to have puppies in abundance at the Humane Society?
We do have puppies regularly at the shelter, but to have more than 20 to 25 puppies in January is not common.
Why do you have them? I was mentioning a couple of the names of them. Did they all come together or in one, I guess, I don't know what the word is, delivery, drop-off, or did they all come in separately?
They all came in separately. They're all different litters. I guess there's many factors play into it. We just happen to have 3 to 4 different litters, and at the same time, some of them to be very big litter. A litter of 7, litter of 12. All the cheese that you saw on our website, those are the same litter. And it's just a combination of having all of them coming in all around the same age. So now when they become available, we ended up with a huge group.
What kind of dogs are these guys, the Tortellini and Cannellonis I was mentioning, these cutie patoots?
They're all Shepherd Cross and Husky Cross. It's hard for us to determine exactly what their breed is because they're stray animals. They were stray dogs, so we don't really know. But what we could tell, probably they're going to be probably large dogs in the futures, and they have both features of shepherds and huskies.
Yeah, I can see that as you're speaking. I'm scrolling down, and one of them clearly has way more husky, the blue eyes, the fluffy white fur. And then others look more sort of spotted and have the shepherd coloring with the light colors over the eyes and the darker fur. So what should people think about if they've never had a puppy and they're thinking of adding a puppy in wintertime especially?
Well, if you never have puppy, adopting a puppy definitely is it will change your life forever for sure. Adopting a puppy can be overwhelming at times, especially with Winnipeg having such a harsh winter. I was just hearing the forecast just now. We have negative 39. So, first thing is having house training can definitely pose a challenge because none of us want to stand out there for an hour waiting for a puppy to go to their bathroom. So sometimes, doing house training with puppy during this winter time can be challenging, but there's always different solutions to come with these challenges, and Humane Society is always ready to provide any kind of support that you need.
How often does the Humane Society have a capacity crisis, as has been caused with this, Thursday you were up to 30 dogs?
In the past year, it has become more common. In the past year alone, we have faced with crisis for about 6 to 8 times throughout the year. And right now we're only in January, and I'm already seeing more than 30 dogs that's needing a home, while on the adoption floor, I only have 23 rooms to house the available for adoption dogs. So the crisis and the capacity issues we consistently facing is very similar across the whole Canada.
So how are you dealing with that? More than 30 dogs, 23 rooms. Are you fostering them out because you don't have the space?
Yes, we are calling all volunteers and public who is willing to provide resource to us to become our foster. We even ask our staff to, is it possible to take a dog home maybe just for a week or so that they don't have to stay in the shelter and then come back when we have space on the floor. We also try to work with the public. We raise awareness about adoptions. We drop the adoptions fee. For this time, we are dropping adoptions fee for puppies specifically to $300 so that, we can encourage public to come and adopt so that we can free up rooms for more dogs.
Why do you think, Daphne, that this is happening right now? The constant overcapacity aspect of this. Why do you think that's happening?
I think there are many factors playing into why a lot of the shelters across Canada is facing capacity issues. First, it is become more and more of a common awareness where there are a lot of dogs needing help in different communities. But at the same time, we are facing a lot of inflation in daily expenses. The vet fees are getting very expensive. So owning a pet definitely will pose another additional layer of challenge for people financially. And that could potentially be stopping people from going and make the decision like, I'm going to take a dog home today. Because the financial burdens that come after that can be huge for someone sometimes.
Just last briefly, what's the impact of living in a shelter for a prolonged amount of time on a puppy specifically?
Yeah, for puppies specifically, it can be very serious. Puppies, during their developmental stage, it is crucial for them to develop social skill, not just with human, but with other dogs as well. And puppies with their weaker immune system, not fully vaccinated, they are exposed to all kinds of potential disease that can be endemic, which is everywhere, including our shelters. So for puppy to stay in the shelter prolonged period of time means they are deprived of the opportunity to actually bond with people, to develop proper social skill, to have enough enrichment to actually give them a good mental development. And staying in the shelter can be very bored. They don't get to spend a lot of time with other dogs. So there's a high chance they can develop even more behavioral challenges down the line.
On behalf of Colby Jack and Brie and Feta and Ricotta, you name them after pastas and cheeses right now, all these little pups online, they're gorgeous. Hopefully they'll be able to find homes that are proper for them. So people can give the Humane Society a call. I know they can give you a call, or they can schedule an appointment or walk in to get more info. Daphne, thank you for being up early with us and telling us about this. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Daphne, he is the manager of adoptions at the Winnipeg Humane Society. The names I'm reading out, of course, are the available puppies and dogs at the society. So please check out winnipeghumanesociety.ca and you can make your own arrangements if you have the capacity to adopt. 6:23 a.m. It's cold. It's minus 21 in Winnipeg. At the airport, temperature is minus 26. They're reading a little differently there. And extreme cold warnings to the north and to the southwest of Riding Mountain as well. Well, if you're not up early with a baby or a puppy, you might be up early at the gym. If getting back to the gym is on your list of New Year's resolutions, then you don't want to miss Marketplace's latest investigation. This week, the team is putting gym equipment to the test to see what germs you might be picking up when you're working out. You might have heard part of this on World Report, but Charles Iagro is here with more now. She's a host with Marketplace. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Okay, I'm getting ready for the gross.
Yes.
What were you looking for and how did you do this investigation?
Yeah, so we were looking for bacteria, yeast, and mold. And we found it. So we actually had a team of testers visit 9 different locations in all across 3 national chains. So Good Life, Anytime, and Planet Fitness. The team took more than 50 samples in all, swabbing elliptical machines, barbells, dumbbells, yoga balls, and exercise mats. Those samples were sent to a lab for analysis. And the idea was really to see if gyms are doing enough to keep equipment clean. We worked with a microbiologist. His name is Jason Tetro. Here he is explaining why it matters that the stuff we're touching at the gym is clean.
So the big problem is the sweat, okay? Because what ends up happening is it makes it really easy for you to be able to deposit something onto a surface, but also pick it up.
So the other thing Jason explained is that our own microbes, they're okay. But once we start coming into contact with other people's, that's when we can potentially run into a problem. And so most of the microbes that we found, likely not harmful for a lot of people, aside from something yucky like, say, athlete's foot or a wart. However, they can pose a different level of risk for vulnerable people. So someone who is immunocompromised, say, or if you've got an open wound or a cut, and some of this stuff happens to find its way in there.
So take us to the actual machines themselves and the equipment. You mentioned the balls and yoga mats, but what else did you find?
Yeah, so the least germy piece of equipment was the elliptical machine. Now I thought, come on, really? People's hands are all over those handles, those grips. But our microbiologist wasn't surprised because if you think about an elliptical machine, even though your hands are on it for, a considerable period of time, it's actually fairly easy to clean. It's usually a smooth, flat surface. Now, the barbells, they were a different story. So one of the barbells we swabbed had really high levels of yeast. Now, our microbiologist said, well, it makes sense because barbells are actually tough to clean. Think about a barbell. Oftentimes there's a grip which has a lot of grooves or crevices. And our microbiologist has explained to me that it's really the way we're cleaning isn't working well. So why? Well, that spray and wipe technique that so many of us gym goers have come to, sort of rely on, well, it's really not doing very much. Here's microbiologist Jason Tetro again.
If you have crevices, it's impossible to be able to get in there. And what we do is we have to get a disinfectant and then leave it there without wiping for a particular amount of time. How many people are going to disinfect their dumbbells for 3 to 5 minutes before putting it back on the shelf? No one.
So just for a little bit of context, Marcy, if you think about things that are common disinfectants, so something like a bleach or alcohol, those actually need 10 minutes to sit wet to be effective as a disinfectant. So you can, think about what you see at the gym. Does anyone ever spray and let something sit wet for 10 minutes? I certainly haven't done that, and I certainly haven't seen it.
The germiest surface was what?
Yeah, so this was interesting, the mat. Now, our microbiologist, again, not super surprised by that because some mats can almost be porous depending on the material. Some of them actually have, like a grip on the surface or some grooves kind of built in to help you if you're doing yoga or something, for example. A lot of people often put their whole body on the mat, you're sweaty. Oftentimes you may have your feet or even your shoes coming into contact with that surface. So it makes sense that there's a lot of stuff that gets deposited on that mat.
What did the gyms have to say about cleaning practices?
So all of them did tell us they're committed to providing safe and clean environments for staff and employees, as well as customers. Anytime Fitness told us bacteria is ubiquitous in the environment and can never be completely eliminated. Planet Fitness told us they encourage members to wipe down equipment before and after each use. And Good Life told us that they shared their our findings with their own cleaning experts. That was kind of neat. And they're always looking for improvements.
So what is the best thing for people to take away from this and to stay healthy if they use the gym?
So the first thing is you really should take a look at that cleaner. Read those instructions. Find out what that critical wait time is and then follow those instructions. If you can't find those details, you should ask a staff member at the gym. Find out what's inside that bottle and how to use it properly. The other thing for people to remember is you really do need to be washing your hands and you really do need to be using a hand sanitizer before and after picking up and touching things. And then the other thing we do get into in the program, if you're taking a shower at the gym, you're definitely going to want to wear some flip-flops and avoid touching those walls and surfaces if you can.
Ugh, there.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Charles D'Agro is a host with CBC's Marketplace. You can check out the gym episode tonight at 8. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. On this cold morning in Winnipeg, it is minus 21 in downtown Winnipeg, minus 26 right now at the airport. Mix of sun and clouds today, although we will see more clouds move in around noon. A high of minus 17 with a risk of frostbite. The owner of a vacant home is fighting the city of Winnipeg over a firefighting bill of more than $100,000. Maria Suzuki has been hit with 3 bills from the city for 4 fires caused by arson at her Elgin Avenue property. In 2023, the city passed a new bylaw charging the owners of empty buildings for firefighting services. But Suzuki says the city miscalculated and charged her more than 10 times as much as it should have.
My property was 1 dwelling unit times how many fire was there. So let's say if it's a four-person firefighter group, then it's going to be $2,600. So if you think as a dwelling unit for one property, then I would have been charged much, much less.
Suzuki's lawyer has written a letter to the mayor asking to plead their case at the next meeting of the property committee. International news now, and a multinational force led by the U.S. and U.K. hit Houthi targets in Yemen early Friday morning. Houthi rebels in Yemen are condemning those strikes, as are Hezbollah and Iran. They were a response to nearly 2 months of Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The Houthis called them a show of support for Gaza during the Israel-Hamas war, and they vow to keep them up, echoing this earlier statement by leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi.
We are more determined to continue to target ships linked to Israel, and we will not back down from that. Our position stems from our faith. The Americans should know what that means.
Russia is requesting a UN Security Council meeting to discuss the multinational strikes, while Ottawa isn't saying what Canada's role is. A statement from British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says Canada provided non-operational support. Former federal New Democrat leader Ed Broadbent has died. He was 87 years old. He is being praised by politicians across the spectrum for his dedication. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had this to say about Broadbent last night.
Ed Broadbent, who served this country with extraordinary heart, compassion, and brilliance through many decades. His service to this country was always focused on strengthening communities, on bringing people together, and believing in what Canadians were capable of.
Trudeau's comments came as he was heading into an event marking former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien's 90th birthday. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. The lunar calendar says 2023 was the year of the rabbit, but in Manitoba, it might have been the year of the coyote. Conservation officers logged almost 700 reports of interactions with coyotes last year, more than double the number recorded in 2022. Stan Garrett is director of the Urban Coyote Research Project. He says several factors could account for a spike in human coyote run-ins, but the likeliest reason is people providing food intentionally or unintentionally.
Coyotes are not going to appear in an area that doesn't have food. And if food becomes more readily available and predictable in space, you're going to have coyotes also becoming more predictable and perhaps more observable or easier to see.
2 children were treated in hospital this past summer after being attacked by coyotes in the North Kildonan area. The Winnipeg branch of the Animal Food Bank Network is desperate for donations. Nicole Frey is founder of the network. She says they've had double the amount of requests for help than normal in the last week and worries they won't be able to keep up.
Especially if this level of demand continues, we won't be able to meet needs. So if anyone's willing to donate food or money so that we can go and buy food when it's needed, that would be great as well.
Frey says they also need volunteers to deliver food. Well, 8 straight wins, a franchise record for the Winnipeg Jets. Gabe Velarde towards the end of the third period there on TSN as the Jets came back to beat the visiting Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago led most of the game thanks to their goalie, Petr Mrazek. Head coach Rick Bowness says his team had a frustrating second period but came back on the third. And he says the fans in the seats also get credit for that win.
There go, Jets go there in the third period. We had a good power play in the third that gave us some momentum, and the crowd was right into it, and we scored that first goal, man. The place exploded, so you give our fans a lot of credit tonight, too.
And it looks like Winnipeg Jets fans are finally starting to believe. After posting the second lowest attendance in the NHL this season, Canada Life Centre was sold out for the second time in 4 games last night. Charles Cruz says it's exciting to know that his city is home to the team with the league's best record.
It's awesome, the way they're going right now, they can definitely take the league and take the Stanley for sure.
Cruz was at the Jets store stocking up on special gear for the Jets' second annual Filipino Heritage Game. That's tomorrow night when the Philadelphia Flyers are in town. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I'm hearing from friends who haven't been to Jets games in a long time now heading out and checking out the team. If you want to see something hot, really cool, 8 in a row.
Yeah, 8 in a row, and it is fun to watch. It's a lot of excitement.
No doubt. All right, good times. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
It's funny when they're doing lousy. Sometimes January in this city, you can feel the edge. So we'll take it. 6:36 a.m. Speaking of the edge, it is brisk out there this morning, but we do not have the active stormy weather of yesterday morning. Before we get into the forecast for today, Abby actually has a couple of snowfall amounts that came in yesterday. So officially, what did we get?
Yes, Winnipeg actually got from between 10 and 20 centimeters, like areas around Winnipeg were reports saying, hey, we got 10 to 20. And then Matlock also got 15 to 20.
So they would be that was the biggest
They
spot?
got the most snow yesterday.
Matlock.
Up until overnight, they got the most snow. Matlock got the most snow. And then Winnipeg also reported up to 20 centimeters.
So just north of the city, if we're looking at the Red River Valley numbers.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, it calmed down. You and I were saying on the air yesterday, we wondered if it was going to continue, through the day, the snowfall amounts. But it seemed to calm, and that gave some time for clearing. What's today going to bring?
Yeah, clearing right now, Winnipeg is minus 21 degrees with ice crystals. Now, today, the city will be waking up to a mix of sun and clouds. Now, however, the clouds is going to be taking over around noon, and we're looking at a high of minus 17 today. But due to the current wind condition, it feels like minus 39 out there. Good morning, Brandon. How you doing? You're currently at minus 26, partly cloudy over there. For folks in Brandon area, we're going to be seeing increasing cloudiness early this morning. You're looking at a high of minus 22, and the wind chill is going to be feeling like minus 39. So there's a risk of frostbite for folks in Brandon. You need to brace for that. Now going up north, we're seeing that Thompson is currently at minus 33 degrees with ice crystals. And of course, you'll be having a mix of sun and cloud today. You're heading to a high of minus 30. A high of minus 26. I was going to say 30-something there. Now, Churchill is at minus 28 with ice crystals. It's clear out there. I will be seeing a high of minus 25.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
You got to ask yourself, hey, once it's minus 26, does it matter if it's like minus 35? Right?
We just say minus a lot.
What's the threshold, I wonder? I always feel, for me, I know what my threshold is, so I won't answer first. Like where you go, okay, it's just cold now.
I'm minus 20. As soon as I got to start plugging in the car.
Okay.
My threshold is I learned something on TV. If you can't, your thumb and your pinky, if they can't meet, that's when it's cold.
If they can't meet? What do you mean? Your thumb and your pinky, you can't put them together?
If you can't put them together and you're outside, that's when it's cold.
Your hand must be frozen solid if that's going on.
Yeah, that's my threshold.
Well, I guess if you're wearing mitts, it's even harder, so...
Well, it's cold, nonetheless, no matter how you measure it or you say it. Corey ran in this morning. How's the commute, either by foot or by car today?
Yeah, it was chilly. I definitely layered up on the way in. You could feel that wind on your face. I wish I wore a bit of a more hardy balaclava than I did. But underfoot, quite lovely, actually. The sidewalks were all clear. Nice bit of grip on there through kind of Wolseley and West Broadway there. Not too bad. As for the streets and the highways, Tim called, who I guess was escaping all that snow in Matlock, making his way to Winnipeg. Highway 8 and 9 were actually doing pretty good. He was able to go to the speed limit, said it wasn't too bad. The odd little drift here and there, but nothing really too big to worry about. And I haven't heard anything yet about any poor conditions on highways. Nothing closed at this point or anything like that on the highways. And haven't heard of anything in the city except for one thing to keep an eye out for. Southbound Kenaston at Cordon, there's actually a down traffic standard. Crews are on scene in the southbound curb lane on Kenaston, just past that intersection, repairing it. This is from the Winnipeg Traffic Management Center. So you want to keep left to get around that, but the lights are still working, but that may just get in your way there. So look out for that. If you see anything else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, or running, I want to hear from some fellow run commuters. Maybe I'm the only one. Hopefully not. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
It's time for business news. Crystal Ramlakan has hooked up with us via Zoom. Hello. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Marcy.
So let's start actually with something that is negative news in business. Bookstore Indigo is laying off staff. What do we know about this so far?
Yeah, that's right. So it's part of the retailer's ongoing efforts to streamline operations, but we don't know how many people are being let go yet. A spokesperson says the cuts stem from the company's strategic plan to make the business profitable again. And, Indigo has seen several quarters of losses and a whirlwind of executive and board changes over the last year. And we've talked about some of those on this segment. Now, it had a net loss of just over $22 million in its second quarter. And during that time, founder and chief executive Heather Reisman had retired and turned the business over to Peter Ruiz. Now, Ruiz left the company abruptly in September, making the way for Reisman to return. Now, last year, the company also dealt with a cyber attack that took down the website, and 4 of the 10 directors left the board. One even said she resigned because of mistreatment. Now, Indigo says while it is a difficult decision to part ways with valued and talented employees, it says it's the right decision for the company and those it serves.
Let's move to another company. Car rental giant Hertz is dumping electric vehicles in favor of gas-powered ones, which seems counterintuitive to where everyone else is going. But what do we know about this?
Yeah, that's right. So the company says it is selling about 20,000 EVs from its U.S. fleet due to higher expenses related to collision and damage when it comes to electric vehicles. Now, Hertz expects to lose about $245 million because of depreciation. The rental company is selling some of its Teslas for as low as $20,000, nearly half the purchase price. And if anyone was following prices, used prices for EVs fell for most of last year as prices for the new ones also went down, and inventories of unsold ones rose. Now, CBC News has reached out to see if the Canadian fleets will be affected as well. We're just waiting to hear back on that. And, Marcy, this decision really underscores the bumpy road EVs have hit as the growth rate on sales has slowed. So as a result, automakers such as GM and Ford are even scaling back their production plans. Now, analysts say this is a warning across the EV space and another sign that EV expectations need to be reset downward across the market. And they say, of course, while there are savings on fuel, there are other hidden costs of EV ownership.
Before we look at markets this morning, Meta is offering some Canadian Facebook users $51 million to settle a class action lawsuit. What are the details of this?
Yes, well, it's offering the money in 4 provinces over the use of some users' images in Facebook advertising. So the legal action claims users' images were used without their knowledge in Facebook's sponsored stories advertising program, which is no longer in operation now. Now, the agreement still needs to be approved by a BC Supreme Court judge in March, and the lawsuit was expanded outside of BC in 2019 to include Saskatchewan, there in Manitoba, and Newfoundland and Labrador. And sponsored stories ran from 2011 to 2014. So if you lived in any of those provinces during those years, you might qualify. Now, this is how it worked. If someone liked a product under the program, Facebook generated a newsfeed endorsement using their name and profile photo, but didn't tell them. Now, lawyers estimate 4.3 million people could qualify as part of this settlement. Class members don't need to do anything yet to get compensation. After the settlement is approved, a process will be announced about how people can submit their claims. But Marcy, after lawyers' fees and because of the amount of people involved, it probably won't be a lot of money each.
Everyone's going to be checking, though. Right?
Yes, you should check it. I did the math. It's probably going to be about like $7 if everyone claims after the lawyer's fees. But, it's better than nothing, I guess.
What's going on in the markets this morning?
So in Europe, markets are higher as investors digest fresh UK economic data. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets fell as China's annual exports dropped for the first time in 7 years. But Japan bucked the trend to extend their record rally. So, of course, Japan is up. Shanghai and Hong Kong are both down. Oil is up $2.62 to $74.64 US per barrel. Gold is up $34.80 to $2,054 US per ounce, and the dollar is up just over 1/10 cent to 74.78 cents US.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too, Marcy.
Take care. That's Crystal Lee Ramlakan from our business desk via Zoom. It's 6:45 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us this morning. I always think it's funny, the optics of the early morning, because I'm on one side of the glass, all by my lonesome, and then on the other side of the glass, now, it's getting like a party in there. Travis, Brad, Corey, and Abby. Our YouTube channel up this morning as well. And then, of course, Corey and Abby on the regular radio team here. Morning, guys. We have ice crystals in Winnipeg. It's very brisk out there. When you walk out, you'll know it. Minus 21 in Winnipeg. At the airport feels like, actually, at the airport it is minus 26. With wind chill, it feels colder. In Thompson this morning, just looking north briefly, ice crystals in minus 33. So bundle up. If you need us on the commute, just a reminder, 788-3093. Unlike yesterday morning, we don't have any highway closures to announce. We're into regular winter driving conditions. Actually, traction because of the snow around the city is pretty good. If you've been plowed, there's going to be some of those streets out in different neighborhoods that they've not yet gotten to. But many of the streets and routes have been plowed and sanded. You're just going to find some spots where the ice is peeking through. So be mindful, but we should have straight ahead winter driving conditions, at least through Winnipeg this morning. Well, next we have a bit of music from a group called out of Toronto, called Ducks Limited, and they have a new album coming out. And speaking of traffic things, their new single came out kind of organically. They were reflecting on a sinkhole that opened up in their neighborhood. And it makes sense because the song is called Hollowed Out. This is Ducks Limited on CBC and Hollowed Out. Minus 21 is the time right now. Temperature right now. Been a long week, folks. Thanks for being along for the ride with us. Friday morning here, January 12th, school day 5 on this cycle. Well, next on the program, Cameron Ortis was once an elite intelligence official with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Late last year, he was found guilty of leaking secret information to police targets. Now, Crown prosecutors are calling for Ortis to be sentenced to nearly 30 years behind bars. A sentencing hearing took place this week, and a decision is expected in early February. We are joined this morning by Stephanie Carvin. She's an associate professor of international relations at Carleton University. She's the author of Stand on Guard: Reassessing threats to Canada's national security. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, just for the listeners' benefit here, can we first start with Cameron Ortis, a little more about him and what exactly he did?
Right. Okay. So Cameron Ortis was an official with the RCMP, a civilian official. So he wasn't in the RCMP regular, corps, I guess, as it were. And he had a really unique job in the sense that he was at the intersection of intelligence and operations. So a unit that was kind of dedicated to ensuring that operations were informed by the intelligence that we receive from our allies, and that also that is gathered by other agencies in Canada as well. So he had access to all kinds of information about what the RCMP is and what its allies or our allies are in fact up to. And he was accused and is now convicted on taking some of that operational information and selling it to a bunch of money launderers for profit.
Now, Ortis was prosecuted for alleged infractions under the Security of Information Act. What is the significance of that from your perspective?
Right. So the Security of Information Act is the act that you're charged under if you have privileged information from the government, and you are then you leak that information for whatever reason, right? Usually deliberately, but not necessarily. And if you violate that, that's the charges that you are basically facing. And we have seen individuals in the past brought up on Security of Information Act charges. There was the case, everyone remembers Jeffrey Delisle, I think, who was a naval officer who was selling secrets to Russia. And then there have been other cases where charges have been brought forward, but I believe this is the first time that an individual has faced these charges in court.
On Great Britain, before they have matches against the host
so there was
Spaniards
no trial.
and Malaysia.
Cameron Ortis went to a jury trial, right, and forced the Crown to make a case for the first time. And the fact that this wasn't successful prosecution, I think, is a pretty significant and good thing.
Some documents that Ortis has been found guilty of leaking contain information collected, as you alluded to, by Canada's allies, other countries. What are the consequences of that for Canada?
So that's a really good point, because in this case, or in other cases, Canada is a net consumer of intelligence. And by that I mean we take in more intelligence from our allies than what we provide them. And as a result of that, I think there's a kind of onus on us to ensure that we are taking not just our own information, but our allied information very, very seriously and protecting it to the best of our ability. So when we have a case like this, that, it's shown that we are able to prosecute individuals who betray Canada's trust and the trust of our allies, and kind of provide some reassurance that, this isn't something that Canada tolerates. Now, I want to be clear here, Canada is not the only country that deals with these kinds of insider threat issues. I was reading, even just this morning, the U.S. is sentencing a military officer for having sold secrets to China, right? So we're not the only country that deals with this kind of problem, but it is something that I think we do have to show that, mistakes happen. Everyone understands that, but we have to show that there's going to be a deterrent effect there.
The defense says Ortis has already spent enough time behind bars. The Crown prosecutor is advising much more time in prison, over 20 years. What do you make of the Crown's argument?
I think that I'm not that surprised, honestly. The fact is really two things. First of all, unlike Jeffrey Delisle, who was sentenced to 10 years in prison, Cameron Ortis has not shown an ounce of remorse for what he did, and he has stuck to what I'm going to call a ridiculous story. I mean, to be clear, I'm not a lawyer, but it's a ridiculous story that he was on some kind of super secret spy mission that absolutely no one could know anything about, even within his own organization. It's just not how things work in Canada. And as a result of not showing remorse, you have to wonder, does he even feel bad about what he did? And this is someone who probably still continues to know a lot of very sensitive operational information. And as a result of that, he may be a risk of trying to sell that information in the future. So I think for those two reasons, the Crown is making the argument that, no, this is someone who needs to be put in jail for some time.
Stephanie, thank you very much for the analysis of this morning. We'll see what happens in February. Appreciate your time.
Cheers.
So the judge's sentencing decision in this case is expected in early February. Stephanie Carvin weighing in this morning, an associate professor of international affairs at Carleton University. She's the author of Stand on Guard, Reassessing Threats to Canada's National Security. Well, I want to mention something that just really took off yesterday when we asked you about it, because we have a bit of a follow-up to it this morning. We started asking you about driving. That's because CAA nationally put out a survey. They do it every year. They wanted to know about the most dangerous habits on the roadways. And factoring in heavily at the top of that list, speed. And then also one of the concerns was that they had thought that things would improve post-pandemic as people may have been driving more aggressively and quickly on the roads, fast on the roads during the pandemic, because you'd be the only car out there. But they thought that people would slow down once traffic resumed to normal levels. But that hasn't happened, they said. So it was a deep concern from their perspective. So that prompted us to ask you, what dangerous winter driving habit specifically drives you crazy? What do you see out there? So we asked you to call the listener line and write in. There's more than 60 comments online, so we thought it warranted a bit of a follow-up. And in a moment, I'll tell you exactly who's going to be on in the next hour talking about winter driving habits and our perspectives on those things and the psychology behind what's happening with us when we get behind the wheel as well. So stay tuned. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells at 3 minutes to 7 and find out what's going on in news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, 2023 was a banner year for coyote sightings in Manitoba. Conservation officers logged almost 700 reports of interactions with coyotes last year, more than double the amount reported in 2022. Two of the reports involved children who were attacked in North Kildonan, so we'll hear more about that story coming up. As well, it is a franchise record, 8 straight wins now for the Winnipeg Jets after coming back to beat Chicago last night. We're going to hear from some Jets fans who were in the Jets store last night, how they're supporting their team now. That's coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
In Winnipeg, it's brisk. It's minus 21 with ice crystals this morning. A high of minus 17 is what we're expecting. But of course, with the wind chills, it's going to feel much colder, right around minus 39 on exposed skin. High risk of frostbite today, so make sure that especially if you're walking or waiting for the bus, that you note that and you've got the right things on your skin. Cover up, bundle up, and call us if you need on the commute, 788-3093. 2 minutes to 7 now, and in the next hour of the show, we're going to have a full interview about that coyote stats that Heather just mentioned, so stay tuned. In addition, we're going to take you into a neighborhood for a lovely story, beautiful winter little story, a rink in the William White neighborhood where kids young and old are learning how to skate. So stay tuned for that with our community reporter, Shanalee Vidal. And to the follow on winter driving. You hear it all the time. People questioning, why does it seem like people forget how to drive in the winter? Even though we live in Manitoba, so to speak. What's the psychology behind our assumptions that people don't know how to drive? That discussion's coming up right after 7. World Report, though, is next. Stay with us on 89.3 FM. This is CBC.
On the Current. You've got the magic touch.
It's nice to get a hug or a pat on the back, but emerging science shows that touch can also do everything from make you less likely to get a cold to help humans bond in groups. A close-up look at the benefits of touch coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. Houthi military leaders are vowing to retaliate for the American and British attacks on sites in Yemen. A spokesperson says the strikes are criminal aggression and says they will not go unanswered. The U.S. and U.K., with support from Canada and other allies, hit more than 60 Houthi military sites across the country. They say it's in response to attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. The Houthis claim they've been targeting ships with links to Israel. As Chris Brown reports, there are now fears the Middle East crisis is expanding.
The British jets that took off from Cyprus overnight and the planes that launched from the American carrier Dwight D. Eisenhower were part of a major attack. Cruise missiles were also launched from U.S. destroyers and a submarine. More than a dozen Houthi locations were reportedly targeted, all with strategic significance, including launching sites for drones, missiles, and surveillance positions. A joint statement, which included Canada, said the strikes are in support of global trade. The Houthis have used missiles, rockets, and small boats to attack global shipping in the Red Sea, claiming they're trying to interrupt trade with Israel. But the bigger trigger for this response may have been a Houthi attack on a U.S. warship earlier this week. Peter Ricketts is a member of Britain's House of Lords and a long-serving diplomat.
The hope will be that this is a strong enough signal for them, probably not to immediately stop, but to wind down these attacks. And I don't believe it's going to lead to an escalation into a regional war with Iran.
The U.S. accuses Iran of arming and supplying the Houthis. Iran's government condemned the attacks. A Houthi spokesman called them barbaric. And Iran's other major proxy militia in the region, Hezbollah, said the United States is now a full partner in what it called the tragedies committed by the Zionist enemy. In other words, Israel. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
NATO member Turkey is condemning the attacks on Houthi sites. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan calls them disproportionate and accuses the U.S. and U.K. of trying to turn the Red Sea into, quote, a sea of blood. But the attacks are being backed by more than a dozen nations, including Canada. Journalist Nick Harper is in Washington. Nick, what more can you tell us?
That's right, John. We're seeing this wider backing from a coalition. There's 14 countries in it, including Canada. They're endorsing these strikes against the Houthis. Now, they point to what they call a significant escalation over the past week in Houthi attacks on commercial vessels. They also point to the UN Security Council meeting in December that condemned the group's attacks. Now, the coalition says that the Houthis' actions are profoundly destabilizing. We're also expecting some of these countries, including Canada and Australia, to provide material support for the operation. And US officials are telling US media here that could come in the form of logistics and intelligence. However, lawmakers within President Joe Biden's own party are questioning the action, saying that Biden should have got approval for the strikes from Congress. This is Representative Ro Khanna.
This has increased the risk of retaliation against our embassies, retaliation against our troops. And that's why I don't understand how they did not come to Congress. The White House had the time to talk to the Canadians, the British, or the Australians, but not to members of Congress.
And so, Nick, what are we watching for today?
Well, I think three big things to watch for today. We're expecting an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council in New York. Russia has called for that to investigate the US and UK strikes. The Houthis, though, are also vowing retaliation. They're saying that the strikes won't go unanswered. They're saying that there will be a heavy price to pay. But also, we could see the potential for more US action. One US official is quoted as saying that these strikes may not be the last word. And Biden himself is saying he will not hesitate to direct further actions if necessary.
Journalist Nick Harper in Washington. Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Israel's legal team is rejecting allegation that its campaign against Hamas amounts to genocide. It just finished laying out its case at the International Court of Justice. Zabi Kugadazan tells us Israel's lawyers say, if anything, it is Hamas that is guilty of genocide.
An upside-down world is what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called these proceedings at The Hague, where a delegation defended the state of Israel against accusations of genocidal acts. Lawyer Malcolm Shaw.
Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population. Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population.
He says Israel mitigates harm to civilians by making phone calls and dropping leaflets to warn Palestinians in Gaza of upcoming military operations. The Israeli delegation also outlined the Hamas attacks on October 7th, which included details of rape and mutilation to show the ongoing threat faced by Israelis.
But it does have every right to act to defend itself in accordance with the rules and principles of international law, and so it has done.
Yesterday, South Africa argued there have been violations as the IDF is attacking and killing Palestinians indiscriminately and on a large scale.
If this was happening anywhere else on the planet, we would not be having this discussion.
Toby Cadman is a lawyer and resident at The Hague. He says this process is not about holding Israel criminally responsible, but to ensure adherence to the Genocide Convention.
What happens as far as Israel is concerned now will define the application of international law for the next generations.
A ruling on provisional measures, including a call to stop Israeli military activity in Gaza, could come in weeks. Abby Kuabasin, CBC News, London.
Some breaking news from St. John's International Airport. Police say they're on the scene and investigating a bomb threat received this morning. They're asking the public to avoid the terminal building. Flights have been put on pause, and there are reports of the main entrance to the airport being blocked off and traffic being rerouted while the investigation is ongoing. In Toronto, a long-awaited inquest into the death of 18-year-old Sami Yatim will begin today. Yatim was in distress and holding a knife on a Toronto streetcar in July 2013 when police were called. He was subsequently shot dead by Constable James Forcillo, who fired his gun multiple times. Forcillo was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison with full parole granted in 2020. The inquest is expected to last about 2 weeks and will hear from 14 witnesses. There are growing calls from international students who want to be allowed to continue to work more hours to pay for their education. A cap of 20 hours was temporarily waived last year, but as Alexander Silverman reports from Moncton, it is set to return this spring.
These days, Karel Boa works as many as 30 hours per week at the reception of a Moncton hospital. The undergrad at the Université de Moncton says she's happy with the workload, and there are other international students just like her. But the ability to work long hours could soon change.
We're currently examining options for this policy in the future, but we know that 40 hours a week is untenable if you're a student.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller, speaking in December, says he's considering a new limit of 30 hours. The federal government temporarily waived the cap in an attempt to address Canada's labor shortage. But Miller says a limit on work hours will be back this spring. Jovial Asundo is president of the International Student Association at the Université de Moncton.
The cost of life in Canada has increased, so they need to increase also the number of hours to work.
Businesses are also speaking out. John Wishart is CEO of the Greater Moncton Chamber of Commerce. He says the region is facing a labor shortage, and international students help fill jobs in big box stores and restaurants.
It doesn't take you very long to realize that international students and newcomers in general are really what is keeping the doors open.
The current policy waiving the cap for international students will continue until April 30th. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Moncton.
It is January in Canada, and after weeks of mild temperatures, winter is hitting parts of the country with a vengeance. Environment Canada has posted extreme cold or Arctic outflow warnings for parts of Yukon, the Northwest Territories, most of BC and Saskatchewan, and all of Alberta. In Calgary and Edmonton, the agency says temperatures could dip to a low of minus 38 Celsius. It's warning temperatures that low can bring on frostbite and that hypothermia can happen within minutes if precautions aren't taken while outdoors. Before we go, a recap of our top story. The Houthi rebels are warning the U.S. and U.K. will pay a heavy price for their attacks in Yemen. Airstrikes targeted more than 60 sites across the country. U.S. President Joe Biden says the strikes are in response to attacks by the Iranian-backed Houthis on ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis say they are not intimidated and will continue to target ships with links to Israel. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
It is cold out this morning. If yesterday's morning, the story of the weather yesterday morning was the snow, today it is certainly the cold weather. So bundle up, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM or on the app. You're listening to Information Radio. You might also be watching on YouTube. Good morning. I mentioned it's cold. Minus 21 is our actual temperature. More detail in a moment. This hour on the show at 10 to 8. Have you seen a coyote lately? Well, you're not alone. Reported encounters more than doubled in Manitoba in 2023. We're going to talk to an expert about how humans and coyotes can coexist. That is coming up in this hour. In addition to something light and lovely and cold, going for a skate, then warming up with some hot chocolate while making some art. All things that were happening in the William White neighborhood. The local association there is making winter activities accessible for area families. Our community reporter will take us to that area this hour. I do want to nod to what we're going to begin with, though, right after we hear from Heather Wells with headlines. We're going to talk more about driving in the winter. So no signaling, lights on high beam, going too slow, tailgating. You shared loads of frustrations with us yesterday about what, from your perspective, it's like to drive in Manitoba in the winter. So today we're going to get into the reasons why we may feel that way and also how we can all drive more safely. So stay tuned. We'll have that coming up. Right now, though, Heather Wells, as I alluded to, is here with a headline update.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg woman is fighting City Hall. Maria Suzuki says she's been saddled with a bill of more than $100,000 because of multiple fires in her vacant home. She has been hit with 3 bills from the city for 4 fires caused by arson at her Elgin Avenue property. Last year, the city did start charging empty building owners for the costs of firefighting. And the Winnipeg branch of the Animal Food Bank Network is desperate for donations. The network's Nicole Frey says they have had double the amount of requests for help with pet food in the last week. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Now, the full forecast from Abby Adeyemi. Good morning.
Good morning once again, Mercy. Current conditions, it remains frigid at minus 21 degrees. And today we're expecting a mix of sun and clouds to linger on. As we progress through the day, the mix of sun and cloud will give way for more clouds later on. And then we'll be looking at that high that is forecasted to be at minus 17 degrees. But factoring the wind chills, it's going to feel like piercing minus 39 as you step out this morning. So it's a reminder to really bundle up for our commuters that will be having like a change of bus and you'd have to spend some time at a bus stop. It's essential you layer up and cover exposed skin because Environment Canada actually has the extreme cold warning for southern Manitoba and northern Manitoba. October. So that they tell it's going to be spanning from today all through till Monday morning. So we're in for a cold weekend, and I'll just advise you, if you're spending time outside, you need to protect yourself. But right now in the city of Winnipeg, we are at minus 21 degrees.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
And Abby's absolutely right. We do have those extreme cold warnings issues. So specifically, parts of northern Manitoba, Flin Flon, Cranberry, Portage, Leaf, Puckatawagan, and Tadoule. Here in the southwest portion is going to get the brunt of the extreme cold around Brandon, Turtle Mountain, and through Roblin, Russell, Dauphin. Let's get into what's going on in terms of the actual commute itself. Corey Funk is here to talk about that.
Well, no highways closed today, and getting updates, for example, from Tim, that Highway 8 and 9 from Matlock is actually looking pretty clear. He was able to go to the speed limit, no real worries on his way into Winnipeg this morning. David, though, says on the eastbound south perimeter between St. Mary's and St. Anne's, there's actually a semi in the ditch, and there's a crew trying to get that semi out of the ditch. So that's blocking the curb lane there. So do look out for that. Keep left. That may be causing some backups on the eastbound south perimeter this morning. And here in the city, southbound Kenaston at Corden, there's crews working on a downed traffic standard. They're blocking that the southbound curb lane on Kenaston. The lights are still working, but you just want to keep left to get around that. That may cause some backups as well. If you see anything else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, and driving, sidewalks were pretty clear for me on the way in on my run, but curious what I'm seeing on the bike lanes. Would love to hear from a cyclist this morning of what you've been seeing on those bike lanes. Give me a call on the CBC Commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, as the shoveling and sanding continues across the province this morning after yesterday's quick-moving storm system, and we settle into another season of real winter driving, you've got to ask yourself, are we just in for months of stress behind the wheel?
I experienced yesterday, when there was so much snow going on in the city, 2 trucks, big trucks that I'm going to call bully trucks, tailgating, being impatient. And one driver sort of whipped past me on Wilkes and gave me the finger. I was going probably about 60, and I believe it's 80 there. But the winter driving conditions were not great. So yeah, just be a little kinder and more patient, drivers. Thank you.
That's Donna. She called our listener line after our interview with Kristen Darbell yesterday on the show from the national arm of CAA, the Canadian Automobile Association. Now, they asked Canadians to list dangerous driving behaviors, and one issue topped the list.
So our concern right now is that speed-related collisions are on a rise, and it actually at this point accounts for a quarter of the fatal collisions on our road, according to the latest data that's available from Transport Canada. So what happened during the pandemic is no one was on the road. Everyone was, locked up in their homes. So if you were the one vehicle on the road and you had an open road and no one in your way, it kind of made it easy for people to speed or to drive a little bit more aggressively. We were kind of hoping to see that behavior change once more people came onto the road. And kind of go back to where we used to be. But instead, we still see this worry and people admitting to speeding and this aggressive driving.
Well, today on the show, we want to build on this conversation because so many of you were writing into us and calling. It might be true that we all need a day or two to relearn or readjust to drive in winter conditions and in snow. But what's going on with us when we think that other drivers aren't driving safely? Professor Daniel Stalder is a social psychologist. He's weighed in on this topic before in his role over at the Department of Psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for being with us. So what should we keep in mind when we see another driver and then we just automatically, we're like, they're dangerous, they're being aggressive. They may be doing those things, but what's going on with people behind the wheel as we're, looking at each other?
So, yeah, when we look at other drivers driving that way, it is kind of automatic for us to think that they're doing something wrong, that they're incompetent in some way. And that might be true, but there is also a common tendency for us to jump to that conclusion too quickly. It's called the fundamental attribution error. It's a understandable and common social cognitive bias, but it's a bias, and so we're jumping to conclusions too quickly. There could be many other factors. it's true that it's winter outside now and there's more snow and that it's more dangerous to drive quickly. But when you look at a particular driver driving too quickly, it's hard to know for sure why that particular driver is driving that quickly. It could have to do with their own emergency that they're trying to get to. They could be late for something. They could have just had an argument with somebody from the location they just came from. So part of my message here is that we cannot know for sure why a particular driver is driving that way. And if we could be open to that possibility that there are factors we don't know about, that would make us less frustrated.
I want to dig into this a bit, the fundamental attribution error. Is part of the challenge with, pardon me, when you apply that to a driving context, does it mean that we also stop seeing the situation and seeing the person in the car as a person? Like, how can it escalate into being dangerous? Do we start sort of just getting aggressive? Is there potential for people to get aggressive with their vehicles if they start getting frustrated as well?
Yes. So frustration and anger is a major contributor to collisions on the road. Anger and hostility while driving, frustration while driving, that increases the risk of a collision by a factor of about 10. It's part of about half of all collisions. This is based on a 2016 review covering the previous 20 years. I think that was in the United States. And so what research has shown is that the more of this bias that somebody shows, the more fundamental attribution error a driver shows toward other drivers, that causes more anger and more frustration, and the anger and the frustration increases the risk of collision. And so if we can reduce this bias, this automatic tendency in how we interpret other drivers, that will make driving safer collectively as a whole.
It's an interesting conversation. I just want to point out something we heard from the listener there. She was talking about what happened to her that felt dangerous to her, obviously was dangerous, people, trucks tailgating her. But she used the term bully trucks. And we had other people writing, and they actually were using, some people were name calling other drivers on my page, actually, calling out their behavior. We also heard people saying, in the call, they were giving each other the finger. Rick Kost wrote into us. He looked at this from another perspective. He said, timid and terrified drivers are a problem too. If you can't handle the conditions, stay home. He said everyone loves to blame the person driving the 4x4 truck with snow tires, but never the one who's still driving on all-season tires and doing 30 in a 60 zone because they're terrified. So how do we calm down the juxtaposition? Because these things are actually frustrating and can be dangerous, all the mix of all this on the road. Does it really work to pull back and try to think why someone's driving how they might be?
Sure. It depends on what our goal is. If our goal is to reduce the collisions on the road as a whole, if our goal is to have safer driving as a whole, among everybody on the road at one time, then yeah, research is pretty clear on this that'll help. That if we can step back and try not to jump to conclusions, try not to assume that these other drivers are incompetent or that these other drivers are aggressive, that will reduce our own anger and hostility, and that will make us safer drivers. But this is all on average. I mean, some of us are safe drivers no matter what we think. Some of us know how to drive on the snow. We're comfortable driving on the snow. We're very cautious. And it doesn't matter whether we get angry or not. But on average, if we're getting angry ourselves, that will make us less safe drivers potentially when you aggregate across all the drivers on the road these days. I do want to emphasize, though, that some of what I'm saying might sound like I'm saying excuse the other driver, don't get upset at the other driver, and I'm really not saying that. I think that's up to the individual. I think the individual who's getting bullied by another driver, I think that individual can decide for themselves whether they want to get upset, whether they want to beep, whether they want to excuse that other driver or not. So as a social psychologist, I'm not saying we should excuse other drivers. I'm just trying to broaden the discussion, broaden the thinking. Technically, in terms of the physics of our brains and the physics of what's happening on the road, technically, we can never know for sure why a particular other driver is driving the way that they are.
Do we judge ourselves different? Oh, sorry, pardon me, go on.
I was just going to say that when some other driver gives you the finger, that may be an exception. I think we can probably say we know that driver is being aggressive because that's hard to interpret any other way. But a lot of these other behaviors, technically, can have other causes besides aggressive or incompetent driving.
I was going to ask, do we judge ourselves differently when we're, because part of the CAA study we talked about yesterday, they asked people to admit their own winter driving, habits or speeding habits behind the wheel that are dangerous. Do we judge ourselves differently? Like, if we're being tailgated versus when we're tailgating?
That's a great question, and the answer is absolutely yes. It's called the actor-observer bias. Not everybody is susceptible to this, but on average, yes, we judge ourselves differently. When we're looking at our own speeding behavior on the snow, when we're looking at our own tailgating behavior on the snow or otherwise, the tendency for most drivers is to come up with situational factors for why we're doing that. Like we're late for something, or we are dealing with a slow driver in front of us. We come up with situational causes for our own risky behavior. But somehow the knowledge of those situational factors goes away from our minds when we're explaining somebody else's behavior. So that's called the actor-observer bias. It's very common. There are multiple reasons for it. So the answer to your question is yes.
How does ego play into this?
So one of the reasons for the actor-observer bias, one of the reasons we give ourselves the benefit of doubt, but we're less likely to give benefit of doubt to others, is ego-related. It's hard for us, not all of us, but it's hard for most of us to acknowledge our own failings, our own mistakes while driving. And that's human nature. That's normal. I mean, everybody has an ego. It's not a dirty word. Everyone has a strong sense of self, and we try to protect it. So yeah, that's one of the primary reasons for judging ourselves differently than other people. But another reason we judge ourselves differently than other people is because we know why we're speeding. We know why we're tailgating. We know our own situations. We know the situation we just came from. We know the situation that we're trying to drive to get to. So we obviously have more knowledge of our own situations than other people's situations, but that doesn't negate the possibility that other people have the same situations we do.
Well, maybe as people are driving to work and listening to this morning, they'll just wait a beat and try to look at something from a different perspective. Thank you very much for going through this with us today, Dan. Stay safe yourself on the roadways.
No problem. Thank you.
That is Dan Stoller, a full professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, talking about some of the psychology that goes on behind the wheel. In prep for that interview this morning, I was reading a whole bunch of studies yesterday. I was trying to find the answer to, do we forget to drive in the winter? And one of the research papers talked about, likened it to putting on goggles that are blurry and you're all discombobulated, but if you get used to them, then you can walk in them. And when you take them off, you have to readjust. So there may, in fact, be a readjustment period. Hopefully we're over it after yesterday's storm. Minus 21 in Winnipeg right now. Our high in Winnipeg will be minus 17 today. Let's get to morning sports. Scott Regehr joins us. Good morning.
Good morning indeed.
So the end of the weekend, let's talk Jets, a new franchise record winning streak.
Incredible. Although it was a bit of a nail-biter last night, Marcy. Connor Murphy scored for Chicago, and Peter Mrazek looked a little bit like another Czech goalie of the past named Hasek, as he was stopping everything the Jets were firing at him. Thankfully, Gabriel Velarde and Nick Ehlers scored just about 2.5 minutes apart, ensuring the victory. On paper, Marcy, this looked like it should have been an easy win for the Jets. Winnipeg atop the NHL standings, Chicago near the bottom, and also without arguably the brightest spot on their team. Actually, inarguably, Connor Bedard hurt for the foreseeable. However, games are not played on paper. We know that. Something head coach Rick Bowness was echoing after this game.
Chicago played a great game. I mean, they held Edmonton to 15 shots the other night, so don't look at the roster and don't look at their standings. It's a good team. They made it very hard for us tonight, and they did get us frustrated. Their goalie made some big saves early, but I give the guys a lot of credit because they bounced back and played the way we have to play in the third period, and we got the 2 points, and that's the most important thing.
Once again, Mark Scheifele had to leave the game early because of injury, Marcy. He left early in the second, favoring his left leg. No word on what the injury is or what may have caused it. The Jets back in action tomorrow night, trying to make it 9 wins in a row when they host the Philadelphia Flyers.
I love that we have something to cheer for directly. Keep that streak going.
Yeah, you betcha. It just lifts everybody's spirits at this time of year.
Meantime, the Canadian National Figure Skating Championships begin today.
They do, and they will be held without the country's top ice dance team involved, Marcy. Laurence Fournier-Baudry and Nicholas Sorensen have withdrawn from the event. Sorensen is under investigation for alleged sexual assault. USA Today reported last week Canada's Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner is investigating Sorensen over an alleged 2012 assault of an American figure skating coach and former skater. These allegations have not been tested in court. Sorensen denied the allegations in an Instagram post this week, but said he and Fournier-Baudry were withdrawing from the Nationals because they believe their participation would be a distraction. And so in their absence, Piper Gillies and Paul Poirier will be favorites to claim the Canadian ice dance title. They are, after all, two-time world bronze medalists in that discipline, and CBC will have live coverage of the National Figure Skating Championships from Calgary all weekend long.
And two of the world's biggest soccer tournaments also begin this weekend.
Yeah, African Cup of Nations and the Asian Cup. The latter of those two starts today in Qatar, where Japan will be the favorites to win. And when you consider the Japanese players are collectively paid more by their pro teams than 21 other countries' players at this tournament combined, the Japanese probably should be favorites. Meanwhile, in Ivory Coast, that is the sound of Gambia's players being welcomed to the airport in the Ivorian capital, Yamoussoukro. The Gambians, Marcy, can no doubt use the encouragement with what they've been through this week. Their original flight to the tournament on Wednesday had to be aborted because of a pressurization issue. The cabin started to heat up, and according to the team's coach, Tom Saint-Fiet, many players fell asleep because of a lack of oxygen. Saint-Fiet says if the plane hadn't turned around, he believes they could have died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Gambia, which made the quarterfinals of the last African Cup of Nations despite being the tournament's lowest seed, plays Senegal, the tournament favorites, coming up on Monday. Good luck to them.
All right, thanks very much, Scott.
You betcha.
Scott Regier with Morning Sports. Just a quick traffic update before the news. Southbound Kenaston to Corden, and there had been a downed light standard. That has now been cleared. 788-3093 with any other updates and a full forecast after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is icy out there. Minus 21 right now in downtown Winnipeg. But if you're out at the airport in the open, it's a little colder. Minus 27 right now with ice crystals in the air. We will see some more clouds move in around noon today. A high of minus 17 with a risk of frostbite. And there is extreme weather warnings, extreme cold, if you are in western Manitoba and in central and northern Manitoba. A Winnipeg woman says she has been saddled with a bill of more than $100,000 because of multiple fires in her vacant home. Maria Suzuki has been hit with 3 bills from the city for 4 fires caused by arson at her Elgin Avenue property. Last year, the city started charging empty building owners with the costs of firefighting. Suzuki says the bills are miscalculated under the new bylaw.
The May fire bill was $36,740. June bill was $32,347, and the August bill was $36,130. So that will be total of over $100,000.
Suzuki's lawyer says those fines should only have been around $2,600 each. He has written a letter to the mayor and to the chair of the property committee asking for a reduction. Suzuki wants to make her case before the committee as soon as possible. To the Middle East now, and Houthi rebels say at least 5 people were killed in Yemen overnight in a series of airstrikes carried out by Britain and the United States. One of the British jets involved in the operation taking off from Cyprus. It's believed more than a dozen Houthi locations were targeted. That includes launch sites for drones and missiles the U.S. says the Houthis have been using in recent weeks to attack container ships in the Red Sea. U.S. President Joe Biden says Canada was among a number of countries that offered their support for last night's action. Houthi military leaders vowed to retaliate, calling the strikes criminal aggression. As we've been hearing, former federal New Democratic leader Ed Broadbent has died. He was 87. Broadbent is being praised by politicians right across the spectrum for his dedication. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had this to say last night.
Ed Broadbent, who served this country with extraordinary heart, compassion, and brilliance through many decades. His service to this country was always focused on strengthening communities, on bringing people together and believing in what Canadians were capable of.
You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. The lunar calendar says 2023 was the year of the rabbit, but in Manitoba, it might have been the year of the coyote. Conservation officers logged almost 700 reports of interactions with coyotes last year, more than double the number recorded in 2022. Stan Garrett is director at the Urban Coyote Research Project. He says several factors could account for the spike in human coyote run-ins in Winnipeg, but the likeliest reason, he says, is people providing food, intentionally or unintentionally.
Coyotes are not going to appear in an area that doesn't have food. And if food becomes more readily available and predictable in space, you're going to have coyotes also becoming more predictable and perhaps more observable or easier to see.
2 children were treated in hospital this past summer after being attacked by coyotes in North Kildonan. The Winnipeg branch of the Animal Food Bank Network is busier than ever and making a plea for donation. The organization provides pet food to people in need. In the past week, it has seen twice as many requests as normal. Nicole Frey founded the network with her husband.
Talked to a couple of our clients yesterday, and one client had been diagnosed with cancer, so isn't working, and another client, her and her mom were facing homelessness, and so it's like such a mixture of reasons why I think people are accessing us.
When you can't afford many of the basics, pet food is one of the things that goes. Frey says they need donations in order to keep up with demand, and if you'd like to help, all you have to do is go to animalfoodbank.org. The Jets made a comeback last night. You just want to keep that cheering going. Nikolai Ehlers in the third period on TSN. Just a minute left in the game. It was the 15th goal of the season for Ehlers as the Jets beat Chicago Blackhawks 2-1. It was the Jets' 8th win in a row. The Jets trailed Chicago most of the game, largely because of Chicago's goalie, Peter Mrazek. And Ehlers says facing Mrazek was frustrating.
Every shot, he was able to just pick it off. He was fantastic tonight. So was LB, obviously.
LB, the Jets goalie, Laurent Brossoit, with his 4th straight win. The Jets next face the Flyers in town tomorrow night. Now, last night's game was the second sellout in the last 4 games for the Jets. They have had the second lowest average attendance in the league so far this season. And buying a hoodie at the Jets store was fan Robert 80, who says it's been a thrill to see the success of Winnipeg and his other favorite Canadian team, the Vancouver Canucks.
Jets have been hard luck, and it's just glorious to see Winnipeg at the top of the heap, but also just Canadian teams, Canadian teams with a legit shot at winning it all.
Well, we'll see. We're still just starting the second half of the season, but after last night's games, the Jets and Vancouver Canucks sit 1-2 in the NHL's overall standings. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi is in now with our regional forecast.
Yes, correct. Right now in Winnipeg, it's minus 21 degrees with ice crystals. The city will be waking up to a mix of sun and clouds today, but that cloud will be taking over around a noon period. So we're going to be looking at a high of minus 17. Due to the wind chill, it's going to feel like minus 39 this morning. Brandon is currently at minus 25 degrees current condition. It's cloudy over there and there's an extreme cold warning for that area. Today you'll be seeing increasing cloudiness early this morning. You're heading to a high of minus 22. Thompson is currently at minus 34 degrees with ice crystals. You'll be seeing a high of minus 26 today. Churchill is at minus 29 degrees with ice crystals. You're also heading to a high of minus 25. If we move to the Interlake region, Gimli is currently at minus 21, mainly cloudy over there. You'll be seeing a mix of sun and cloud today, and you'll be heading to a high of minus 16. Dauphin is currently at minus 21 with light snow. Also, we have extreme cold warning for that region. You'll be seeing periods of light snow today. You're heading to a high of minus 23. Steinbach is at minus 25, mainly cloudy over there, heading to a high of minus 16. And if we go to the Pembina Valley region, Morris is currently at minus 22, mainly cloudy over there. Today you'll see a mix of sun and cloud, and then you'll be heading to a high of minus 17. But with the wind chill, it's going to be, there's a risk of frostbite for you along the Pembina Valley region. Right now in Winnipeg, we are at minus 21 degrees.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
With details on your commute this Friday morning, here's Corey Fung.
So far, actually, the good news I'll start with is that the highways actually seem to be fairly clear overall. Been hearing, for example, Tim coming from Matlock, highways 8 and 9, pretty clear. And actually, Matlock, as we heard earlier, actually got the most snow. So if that's clear on 8 and 9, chances are a lot of the other highways are looking pretty all right as well. But if they're not, you can always call me. Here in the city, there is just one thing you'll want to keep an eye out for right now. Eastbound Chief Peguis, just approaching Henderson. There's a stall blocking that eastbound turn lane. So keep it left to get around that. There is a tow truck on scene, according to the Winnipeg Traffic Management Center. So hopefully that does clear out shortly. But other than that, the highways seem okay. But I did actually also get one update. Eastbound South Perimeter between St. Mary St. Anne's, there was a semi in the ditch, and it was getting pulled out by crews. They were blocking that curb lane on eastbound South Perimeter between St. Anne's and St. Mary's. So that may get in your way. Keep left if you are in that area as well. 204-788-3093 is the number to call.
Well, as you heard Heather mention in the news, in Manitoba, reported coyote interactions doubled in 2023 compared to the year before. We'll have an interview about that this half hour. We've asked you on Facebook, what have you seen? And you're writing in. But Corey, I understand somebody also sent you directly some photos.
Yeah. So Deb Bosch sent me an email of in Turtle Mountain she lives, and it's not only of a coyote, but it's a coyote getting in a staring match with a beaver.
Look at them. They're like standing on the ice.
Yeah, they're kind of both. Like the coyote looks kind of casual, and the beaver is like, "Hey, bud, like, what are you doing over here? Like, get out." Yeah, it's kind of wild. So Debbie said she didn't. We don't know exactly what happened between the beaver and the coyote, but I think Debbie said that it may not have gone very well. And
for the beaver.
For the beaver.
Yeah, I think Deb's probably right.
Yeah.
So send us any of these photos. I mean, it's an incredible nature photo that she sent here.
Wild, yeah.
So if you have some of those, send them to us, share your stories, and we'll get some analysis of why this trend looks like it's been happening. These reports are up. But also, what do you do if you encounter a coyote?
Yeah, radio 893 at cbc.ca. You can send that to, and it may show up on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page as well as we stream it live and have the interview later on.
All right, thanks very much, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, strapping on a pair of skates is a favorite winter activity for many, but not everyone has the skills or the equipment to be able to get out on the ice. That's why the William White Neighborhood Association in Winnipeg has been putting on a Learn to Skate program. It's free to attend, the skates are provided, and CBC Manitoba's community reporter Shanley Vidal and videographer Jason Empsom went out to the Pritchard Playground on a snowy evening earlier this week to learn more.
What's happening here is we just kicked off our skate program. We're lucky we've got cold weather now so we can have ice. We started it 5 years ago because unfortunately the area here, a lot of families in the area here can't afford to buy skates. It's not in the budget. So we wanted these kids the opportunity that other kids have. Well, we went ahead and we started asking for donations, and to date, we got overwhelmed with skates. We're up to 125 pairs of skates, men's, women's, children's, and it was just overwhelming the support we got from people in the community and around. Basically, the person comes in the front door here, signs up with the forms over here on the counter, and then they're given a pair of skates.
I am a figure skater. I was with Special Olympics from 2006 to 2013.
What do you love about figure skating?
All the things that I can do that others wish they could.
Like what?
Sow cows, toe loops, spins. Yeah, go Peyton! I also help the little kids here learn to skate.
I've been working with her.
When you're learning to skate, you're going to fall. That is a guarantee.
Good job, you're awesome.
I just give them lots of love and encouragement as they learn, because I understand that learning to skate is a challenge.
Yeah. It's exciting to see them on skates. Putting the music on. Some of them never been on skates before. And there you go. Get out of your way. So to see them on a pair of skates, and the little one today, never been on a pair of skates. She was skating with the red thing. You want to try without the red thing now? Woo! Yes!
Yeah, go Peyton!
And a few minutes later, she was skating on her own. So it's so exciting to see kids learn on the railing and then just be able to just do it on their own. It's so fun. It's so, I'm excited. It's really exciting. It gives the community something to do. Family, we can do family things here. The kids are here learning. We're going to become some great skaters.
It makes my heart so happy to watch fellow kiddos learn to figure skate and learn to find the love of skating that I have. And I hope they keep with it and they keep improving their skills.
Way to go, Peyton! Woo! I just love the William White community, and come on out and skate and get some skates. We've got lots of pairs and we'd love to see more people out.
What's happening here is we just kicked off our skate program. We're lucky we've got cold weather now so we can have ice. We started it 5 years ago because unfortunately the area here, a lot of families in the area here can't afford to buy skates. It's not in the budget. So we wanted these kids the opportunity that other kids have. Well, we went ahead and we started asking for donations, and to date, we got overwhelmed with skates. We're up to 125 pairs of skates, men's, women's, children's, and it was just overwhelming the support we got from people in the community and around. Basically, the person comes in the front door here, signs up with the forms over here on the counter, and then they're given a pair of skates.
I am a figure skater. I was with Special Olympics from 2006 to 2013.
What do you love about figure skating?
All the things that I can do that others wish they could.
Like what?
Sow cows, toe loops, spins.
Yeah, go Peyton!
I also help the little kids here learn to skate.
I've been working with her.
When you're learning to skate, you're going to fall. That is a guarantee.
Good job, you're awesome.
I just give them lots of love and encouragement as they learn, because I understand that learning to skate is a challenge.
Yeah. It's exciting to see them on skates. Putting the music on. Some of them never been on skates before. And there you go. Get out of your way. So to see them on a pair of skates, and the little one today, never been on a pair of skates. She was skating with the red thing. You want to try without the red thing now? Woo! Yes!
Yeah, go Peyton!
And a few minutes later, she was skating on her own. So it's so exciting to see kids learn on the railing and then just be able to just do it on their own. It's so fun. It's so, I'm excited. It's really exciting. It gives the community something to do. Family, we can do family things here. The kids are here learning. We're going to become some great skaters.
It makes my heart so happy to watch fellow kiddos learn to figure skate and learn to find the love of skating that I have. And I hope they keep with it and they keep improving their skills.
Way to go, Peyton! Woo! I just love the William White community, and come on out and skate and get some skates. We've got lots of pairs and we'd love to see more people out.
Manitoba's community reporter Shanley Vidal, along with videographer Jason Empson. They went out to the Pritchard Playground talking to people involved there with a Learn to Skate program. So the William White Neighborhood Association Winter Skate program is on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. It runs from 5 o'clock in the evening until 8 p.m. You can also catch it on the weekends. So this weekend on Sundays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And by the way, there's also going to be a family skate day that's scheduled for Louis Riel Days. So that's coming up next month on February 19th.
Imagine mannequins brought to life with flowers. A journey of cultural discovery through florals. Fleur de Ville Voyage is coming to the Leaf, presented by the Assiniboine Park Conservancy, and CBC is a proud sponsor. Local florists transform the Leaf Gardens into an exhibit you don't want to miss. Fleur de Ville Voyage, January 11th to 21st. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
It is minus 21 in Winnipeg. We've been there all morning. We'll be around minus 17 for the day with really cold wind chills of minus 39 in Winnipeg. Extreme cold warnings issued for Flin Flon and parts of the north, as well as southwestern Manitoba, Brandon, Roblin through Riding Mountain National Park. Your wind chills could even be around minus 50. So bundle up this Friday morning, and thanks for joining us here on CBC. Well, you have maybe seen a coyote around town lately, and if you have, you're not alone. As we've been hearing in the news, in 2023, the Manitoba Conservation Officer Service logged 677 reported interactions with coyotes. That's more than double the 335 reports the previous year in 2022. Now, the majority of these reports are simply sightings. They're not physical interactions. And to be clear, the uptick in reports does not necessarily mean the population has skyrocketed. The province says it might just mean that more people feel inclined to report what they see, especially after we had the incidents with 2 children who were attacked by coyotes this past summer in the city of Winnipeg, just in the Riverbend neighborhood, sort of that area, Winnipeg. Cheryl Woloski wishes she reported her encounter. She lives, speaking of that part of the city, in North Kildonan. She's just down the road from where one of those children was attacked. Earlier this summer, before either of the attacks, she heard her large dog bark at something on the other side of the chain link fence in her yard.
And I looked up, and there was a coyote at the fence. So the coyote was snarling at my dog, and of course my dog was going crazy. And my worry was the coyote was going to jump the fence and come into the yard. So I went back to the back, and I grabbed the poker from our fire pit, and I started bashing on the fence and screaming to get the coyote to go away. And the coyote just then turned its attention on me and kind of snarled at me, teeth out, then went back to snarling at the dog, and my husband finally came out of the house. He was in the house doing something, and he heard all the commotion. He came out of the house, and he had a shovel in his hand, and he went to the back, and as he went there, the coyote looked at him and started to snarl, and then all of a sudden just turned around, walked slowly to the end of the park, sat down, and stared at us. We just moved out into this area probably 3 years ago, and we never had any encounters with this kind of thing before. So, and I've always heard coyotes, they do their own thing, they go their own way, but we have quite a few walking through this park here. I feel bad now that I never phoned in. I didn't know you could phone in, because now I'm thinking, was that the same coyote that attacked those kids? And could I have prevented it?
Cheryl Owoski's coyote encounter from earlier this summer. Now, a lot of you are writing to us this morning about sightings around town. Stan Garrett's here today to weigh in. Stan is a professor of wildlife ecology at Ohio State University, but director there of the Urban Coyote Research Project. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Stan's with us via Zoom. So did Cheryl do the right thing, and would a coyote jump the fence? I think a lot of us don't understand much about their behavior.
She did do the right thing. We usually recommend that people, if a coyote isn't running away like they should when they approach, then you should try to be very big, aggressive, and try to basically communicate to them that they should not be behaving that way. So that means taking a stick, hitting the ground with it, or doing anything to convey that's, that we're the boss and they aren't. So they did the right thing.
How you alluded there that this is not usual for a coyote to, want to get involved with a human in a natural interaction like that. What might lead a coyote to act aggressively toward a human or their pet?
Right. So that's not a typical behavior to stand their ground and act aggressive. And for them to change their behavior that way, usually it's the result of food. It's not always the case, but I would say what we've seen is over 90% of the cases of a coyote all of a sudden loses its fear of people, it's probably because they're associating people with food, or have they become too comfortable around us. And so we generally start looking for that as a primary factor. And it could be people accidentally feeding them. They may not know that they're providing food for a coyote because they may not know a coyote is there. Or there could be actually people intentionally feeding them. And we do have a problem with that as well.
What are some of the things that people do to make coyote aggressive interactions more likely beyond the food? Or maybe I should flip that and say, what should people be aware of so that they can limit these aggressive interactions?
Right. So first of all, it's not uncommon to encounter a coyote because there are coyotes out there, and they usually do their best to try to avoid us, but they can't always do that. Sometimes they just get caught at the wrong place at the wrong time. And when that happens, they should run away. And now if they see a coyote that's not running away, in some cases it could be a young coyote that's simply curious and they're not really sure how to respond. And that's where you have an opportunity to show them that, hey, we're in control. And that's where you would wave your hands, yell at them, shout at them, and take a step toward them. Usually, in almost all cases, that's enough to provoke them to run away.
Got it.
But in cases where you do have a habituated coyote, or there may be some other extenuating circumstances, like, for example, there could be pups. So like in May and June, that's a case where often a coyote may be defending an area because of pups are nearby. They may be reluctant to run away then. Then you may have to go a little bit further by again, yelling and maybe throwing something at them. And if they don't, then that's something that definitely needs to be reported to authorities. And if it's a repeated process, if someone else also reports the same thing, then that may be an animal that's now changing its behavior to becoming aggressive toward us, and that would be a threat.
Is there any upside to having coyotes in a city's ecosystem?
Yes, there are upsides. Unfortunately, we don't see those upsides as much as we see the conflicts because their upsides occur out of our sight. They're rodent-eating machines, and so they're out there eating a lot of rodents, which the rodents actually cause a number of problems for us. A lot of diseases are transmitted by rodents to us. So they're reducing the rodent population. They reduce some other prey populations, prey that we often consider to be nuisances to us. So rabbits and that type of thing. So they're actively doing that on a daily basis, but they do it out of sight, and so you don't typically see it.
Could we be seeing a rise in populations here? And again, we're looking at whether or not it's a rise in reports versus population. But if we are seeing a rise in population, what could be the cause of that? A lot of people were talking about. I'm curious whether or not, wildlife changed during COVID. We talked all about it and whether or not populations blossomed there. But from your perspective and research, what might be the cause of a rise in coyote populations?
So I do agree with the caution that came with that statement from the ministry or the authorities that rise in incidence doesn't necessarily mean it's a rise in number of coyotes. In fact, to have that great of a change in number in a relatively short period of time, say in 1 year, is probably more a change in behavioral responses in both changes in behavior of coyotes as well as changes in behavior of people. So you could have a few individuals that all of a sudden are usually nocturnal or active at night, all of a sudden become active during the day at the time that we're active, and you have heightened awareness by people. You have a massive increase in reports. So that's often what we have. It actually takes a while for coyote numbers to change because they only reproduce once a year. They only have one litter. And so even when they increase their litter size, it's only a change from about 5 pups to 8. So for a numerical change to happen, it actually takes a lot of time. And they're also territorial. So they're actually excluding other coyotes from moving in.
I'm sorry to interject. We're a little bit short on time, unfortunately, but I want to make sure I get this question in. You mentioned that usually the pups will be April, May. I think you said spring. So is it unusual to see the activity at this time of year?
No, in fact, actually right now, you're going to see coyotes probably more active because we're heading into the mating season. So they mate during January and February. This is actually when they're also likely to be more aggressive toward dogs because, again, they're territorial, they're monogamous, they only have one mate. But in that area, they're highly defensive toward other canids. And so their hormone levels are at their highest level at this time of year. And so we often see an increase in dog interactions with coyotes during this time because of their hormone levels and the fact that they are defending their mates.
Stan Garrett, thank you for being with us via Zoom today. Appreciate your expertise.
You're welcome.
Stan Garrett is a professor of wildlife ecology at Ohio State University and director of the Urban Coyote Research Project. To report a sighting or encounter here in Manitoba, 204-945-5221. Heather?
The owner of a vacant home is fighting the city of Winnipeg over a firefighting bill of more than $100,000. Maria Suzuki was hit with that bill for 4 fires caused by arson at her Elgin Avenue property. We'll hear more in our next news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather. Cold -21 in Winnipeg. World Report is coming up next. We remember Ed Broadbent after 8.
Q with Tom Power. Jeff McFetridge is not a household name, but I bet you've come across his work, maybe in a gallery or on your Apple Watch or your Nike shoes. Jeff McFetridge will tell you how he keeps his integrity as an artist while doing all this corporate work.
If you don't believe in what you're doing, it's just too hard to do.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It's nice to get a hug or a pat on the back, but emerging science shows that touch can also do everything from make you less likely to get a cold to help humans bond in groups. A close-up look at the benefits of touch coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. We begin with a dangerous escalation in the Middle East. Houthi rebels are vowing to retaliate after American and British forces, with support from Canada and other allies, targeted military sites in Yemen. The major strikes are in response to weeks of attacks against ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis claim to be in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. British military officials are characterizing the overnight attacks as self-defense. Chris Brown reports.
The British jets that took off from Cyprus overnight and the planes that launched from the American carrier Dwight D. Eisenhower were part of a major attack. Cruise missiles were also launched from U.S. destroyers and a submarine. More than a dozen Houthi locations were reportedly targeted, all with strategic significance, including launching sites for drones, missiles, and surveillance positions. A joint statement, which included Canada, said the strikes are in support of global trade. The Houthis have used missiles, rockets, and small boats to attack global shipping in the Red Sea, claiming they're trying to interrupt trade with Israel. But the bigger trigger for this response may have been a Houthi attack on a U.S. warship earlier this week. Peter Ricketts is a member of Britain's House of Lords and a long-serving diplomat.
The hope will be that this is a strong enough signal for them, probably not to immediately stop, but to wind down these attacks. And I don't believe it's going to lead to an escalation into a regional war with Iran.
The U.S. accuses Iran of arming and supplying the Houthis. Iran's government condemned the attacks. A Houthi spokesman called them barbaric. And Iran's other major proxy militia in the region, Hezbollah, said the United States is now a full partner in what it called the tragedies committed by the Zionist enemy. In other words, Israel. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
The attacks in Yemen sparked demonstrations outside the White House in Washington. Pro-Palestinian protesters condemn the attacks on the Houthi sites. They claim the airstrikes will only help Israel, which they blame for the deaths of thousands of people in Gaza. Journalist Nick Harper is in Washington. Nick, while the attacks were carried out by the U.S. and the U.K., they're being backed by a wider coalition of nations, including Canada. What can you tell us about that?
That's right, John. We're seeing this wider backing from a coalition. There's 14 countries in it, including Canada. They're endorsing these strikes against the Houthis. Now, they point to what they call a significant escalation over the past week in Houthi attacks on commercial vessels. They also point to the UN Security Council meeting in December that condemned the group's attacks. Now, the coalition says that the Houthis' actions are profoundly destabilizing. We're also expecting some of these countries, including Canada and Australia, to provide material support for the operation. And US officials are telling US media here that could come in the form of logistics and intelligence. However, lawmakers within President Joe Biden's own party are questioning the action, saying that Biden should have got approval for the strikes from Congress. This is Representative Rokana.
This has increased the risk of retaliation against our embassies, retaliation against our troops. And that's why I don't understand how they did not come to Congress. The White House had the time to talk to the Canadians, the British, the Australians, but not to members of Congress.
And so, Nick, what are we watching for today?
Well, I think three big things to watch for today. We're expecting an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council in New York. Russia has called for that to investigate the US and UK strikes. The Houthis, though, are also vowing retaliation. They're saying that the strikes won't go unanswered. They're saying that there will be a heavy price to pay. But also, we could see the potential for more US action. One US official is quoted as saying that these strikes may not be the last word. And Biden himself is saying he will not hesitate to direct further actions if necessary.
Journalist Nick Harper in Washington. Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Israel has just made its case defending itself against allegations of genocide.
The Genocide Convention was not designed to address the brutal impact of intensive hostilities on the civilian population.
It was part of the case that Israel's legal team just laid out in The Hague. Yesterday, the court heard from South Africa's lawyers who said Israel's military campaign has killed too many civilians. And it argued that Israeli politicians made statements that signaled genocidal intent. For more, we reached the host of CBC Radio's Ideas, Nala Ayed, at The Hague. Nala, what did Israel's legal team tell the court this morning?
Well, there were a couple of main themes that the lawyers touched on today that painted a very different picture of its actions in Gaza than we heard yesterday. They outlined Israel's efforts to protect civilian lives in Gaza and to facilitate humanitarian and medical aid, and also its recent decision to scale back military operations as evidence that it cannot have genocidal intent against Palestinians in Gaza. They also outlined in detail Hamas's own culpability in the damage and the killing of innocent civilians in Gaza and in Israel itself. The key point that they also made is that having provisional measures, interim measures imposed that would stop the fighting in Gaza would tie Israel's hands in dealing with Hamas, which it describes as a genocidal organization. So in the remarks, Israeli lawyers counseled the judges to dismiss the application.
Nala, what happens now that both sides have made their case?
Well, the president of the court, at the end of the proceedings, promised to render a decision on this matter as soon as possible. And just a reminder, it will be on the matter of provisional measures, of an interim or an emergency measure to stop the fighting. If the court decides to go in that direction, it will decide what exactly those measures will be. And if it does consider the bigger question, that will take many years to resolve.
CBC's Nala Ayed at The Hague. Thanks, Nala.
You're welcome, John.
The Federal Aviation Administration in the U.S. says it will increase its oversight of Boeing production and manufacturing. Today's announcement comes just one day after the FAA launched an investigation into the aeronautical company. It's all part of the fallout from last week's incident with Alaska Airlines. A flight involving a Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft was forced to make an emergency landing after it lost a passenger door plug during a flight. We have breaking news from St. John's International Airport in Newfoundland. People are being asked to stay away from the terminal, and all flights have been paused after the airport received a bomb threat earlier this morning. The Royal Newfoundland Constabulary is on site and investigating the credibility of the threat. Our colleagues in Newfoundland report the terminal was evacuated and operations at the airport are at a standstill. In Toronto, the coroner's inquest begins today into the death of a teen who was shot and killed by a police officer on board a streetcar in 2013. 18-year-old Sammy Ateem was shot multiple times by Toronto Constable James Forcillo. Forcillo was sentenced to more than 6 years in prison. Philip Lishanuk reports.
Sammy Ateem was on an empty streetcar in downtown Toronto on July 27, 2013. The 18-year-old was holding a knife and acting erratically when he was shot at least 8 times. Asha James, the lawyer for Sahar Bahadi, Yatim's mother, hopes the inquest will improve police training.
To use different tactics in order to try to resolve these situations. 5, 6 officers with weapons drawn, screaming commands at you can't be the only way that we're training police how to de-escalate these situations. It's not effective.
Constable James Fursillo was convicted of attempted murder. He appealed the conviction on the basis Yatim committed suicide by cop, but lost. Sentenced to 6.5 years in prison, he was paroled after serving less than 2. Patrick Watson is an assistant professor in criminology at the University of Toronto. He expects recommendations on how police can better interact with people experiencing a mental or drug-induced crisis.
I do expect we'll hear some more about the different types of approaches and the different types of models of these emergency response units that involve psychiatric nurses.
Police services across the country have piloted such crisis response teams and have reported a reduction in people taken into custody under provincial mental health acts. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally, recapping our top story, Houthi rebels say they will retaliate for U.S. and U.K. attacks on their military sites in Yemen. The airstrikes hit about 60 targets in more than a dozen locations and are in response to Houthis' attacks on ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis say it's in support of Hamas and its war with Israel. They vow attacks on ships in the region will continue. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, if you ever miss World Report, you can hear it anytime, anywhere, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. 8:10 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or on YouTube. Thanks for joining us on CBC. Minus 22 is our current temperature. This half hour on the show, we're going to talk to a hockey coach who's a woman about all the buzz around the success of the Professional Women's Hockey League and how the league is hitting close to home for her local team in particular. So stay tuned for that interview. Also coming up this half hour on the program, as you have been hearing, Canada has lost a political icon of the 1980s, former federal New Democrat leader, Ed Broadbent. Died yesterday. He was 87 years old. This half hour, we'll talk about why he had an impact, not just across the country, but here in Manitoba, on politics and on the party, the NDP. Stay tuned. It's coming up. Here's Heather Wells now with our headlines.
Good morning. A Winnipeg woman is fighting City Hall. Maria Suzuki says she has been saddled with a bill of more than $100,000 because of multiple fires at her vacant home. She's been hit with 3 bills from the city for 4 fires caused by arson at her Elgin Avenue property. Last year, the city did start charging empty building owners the costs of firefighting. Have you seen a coyote lately? Many Manitobans have. Conservation officials logged almost 700 reports of interactions with coyotes last year, more than double the number of the year before. And what do you do if a coyote gets too close? We're going to hear in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Time for our forecast now with Abby Adeyemi.
Good morning, Marcy. Currently, Winnipeg is at minus 22 degrees with ice crystals. The city will be experiencing a mix of sun and clouds today, but there's more. As we move farther into the day, the sun and cloud will give way for cloudier sky, and the high is set for a brisk minus 17 degrees today with the north wind blowing. The wind chill remains a biting minus 39 degrees. So if you're stepping out and you will be changing buses today, you need to take extra care if you're going to be spending time at the bus stop. But right now, Winnipeg is currently at minus 22 degrees.
Corey has the commute.
Yeah, really. So far, one of the biggest issues is eastbound south perimeter between St. Mary's and St. Anne's. There was a semi in the ditch. There was a crew pulling out that semi and could still potentially be blocking the curb lane. So keep left if you're heading on the eastbound south perimeter right now. There was that issue at southbound Kenniston and Cordon that's been cleared, but eastbound Chief Peguis approaching Henderson, there's a stall blocking that outside kind of eastbound turn lane. So keep left to get around that. There is a tow truck on scene, so hopefully that will be cleared soon. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC Commuter line. I will let folks know what you're seeing. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, the Professional Women's Hockey League, the PWHL, is now in its third week of games, and so far the league broke its own attendance records twice in 5 days. Last Saturday, more than 13,000 fans were at the PWHL Minnesota's home opener at the XL Energy Center in St. Paul. Our next guest says this is only the beginning for women's hockey. Regan Bolt is the head coach of the Balmoral Hall Blazers. She's played with the Blazers and has played professionally overseas as well. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. So what are your thoughts on the league so far, and how do you feel as a woman?
Incredible. Couldn't be happier that, it's finally come to fruition, and finally a woman can watch women's professional hockey on TV, live streamed, all the games. It's just incredible moment for women's hockey.
What have you heard from your players about it?
They're excited. We actually had one of our players down in Minnesota last weekend for their game. And yeah, there's just a buzz around the dressing room, and they're following on social media, they're watching the games, and yeah, they're excited that they have something to look forward to, after university, after college. So,
what's the change in that? Like, what would you have heard from players that are playing at a high level before that? Would they just know that they had nowhere to go?
Essentially, yeah. There's opportunities overseas for girls to play, but to make a living and play women's hockey was never really a thing. There is opportunities here and there with leagues that were around and then, had folded and stuff. So the one league for the girls has just been incredible, and yeah. So now that it's here to stay. Just the excitement around it, I think, has given them a whole new look after college and university, that they can make a living playing women's hockey now.
How does it open doors for coaches like yourself, Regan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's opportunities now for not only, women pro players, but now women pro coaches, women pro broadcasters. It's just opened so many doors for people like myself that, may want to get into the professional game at one point.
We have to talk specifically about your team and players, because there are PWHL players, pro players now, Katie Tabin and Corinne Schroeder. They're Balmoral Hall alum. How does seeing alumni at that level inspire your players directly? Like, some of your players must know them, follow them, I'm guessing?
Oh, absolutely. So, we always say once a Blazer, always a Blazer. And both Katie and Corinne have been back with our team actually right before they went to their respective training camps. And, Katie was out on the ice teaching our defensemen. We had Corinne Schroeder come play in net with the girls. So, they have that connection to them, not only, as an athlete, but more so personally now that they've been in the dressing room, they've seen them. And, yeah, it just gives them, something to look forward to. And the fact that it hits so close to home is very inspiring for our girls.
You played pro hockey in Vienna, Austria. What's it like watching the league get this kind of hype in North America? And I'm just curious whether or not you would have, gone for it had it been around when you were, looking at the trajectory of your own career.
Yeah, you know what? I absolutely would have. It's definitely something that if I was still in shape and not so far out of the game, it's probably something that I'd look into. But yeah, having played professionally overseas myself, I mean, there definitely wasn't the hype in the area that I played in, unless we went to, the European Championships. But to have this in North America now, that's exactly what women's hockey needed. There's a lot of hype around women's pro hockey in Sweden and in Finland. Their elite leagues are very awesome, and they're very well supported by their fan base and their men's team. So to have that now in North America with one league, not two leagues competing against each other, that's exactly what women's hockey needed here, and the hype isn't going away.
So because that split doesn't exist anymore, is that part of why this is taking off in a different way? Because, as you mentioned, we've had professional women's leagues in North America before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's best on best now, whereas before it was a couple different leagues competing against each other, and you're competing against the Swedish league, the Finnish league, but now those players are coming over here because of the one league and because it's best on best, and leagues aren't competing against each other. It's the best of the best, and it doesn't get any better than that.
You have tickets to an upcoming game? You haven't been yet, eh?
I have not been, but I have bought tickets for March 24th in Minnesota. Minnesota's playing Montreal, so excited to go there and see the hype and get to see BH alum Katie Tabin play. I never played with her. I graduated before her, and I never got to coach her either. But she's become a friend of mine, so I'm really excited to see her play live and live out her dream along with all the other women on the ice.
Well, go women, honestly, and go sport. It's about time. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Regan Bolt, head of the Balmoral Hall Blazers. You can catch the PWHL back in action tomorrow night. Ottawa, Toronto, Boston, and Montreal all hitting the ice. Games are streamed also on YouTube, and they're televised on CBC.
Mannequins brought to life with flowers. A journey of cultural discovery through florals. Fleur de Ville Voyage is coming to the Leaf, presented by the Assiniboine Park Conservancy, and CBC is a proud sponsor. Local florists transform the Leaf Gardens into an exhibit you don't want to miss. Fleur de Ville Voyage, January 11th to 21st. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
It is minus 22 in Winnipeg. Will be around minus 17 on your Friday morning. It's school day number 5. Nice clear sky out there, and the roads are pretty calm, pretty decent driving conditions. But drive for winter. You're going to find some slick spots in between the snow. And, of course, in some parts of the city, they're still keeping up with clearing the snow. But there's already some sand down in spots. Next on the program, Manitoba's NDP Premier Wab Kinew called Ed Broadbent a, quote, beacon of integrity and a champion of justice. In a post on X, Kinew wrote, Ed was the first person to call and encourage me after I lost the 2019 election, and one of the first to call and congratulate me when we won in 2023. He embodied perseverance in the hopes of making our country better, end quote. Ed Broadbent, former leader of the federal New Democrats, died yesterday. All across Canada, people and pundits are remembering him as a standout politician of the 70s and 80s, an advocate for social justice and workers' rights, and all in all, just a good guy, people are saying, a man who spoke frankly and was down to earth. Glenn McGregor's here to reflect and also to talk about why this is resonating, not just in federal politics, but all across the provinces as well, especially in the prairies. Glenn is a reporter with the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Hi.
Hi there, Marcy.
So for those of us that really lived through the 70s and 80s, and I'm a political lover, so I followed a lot of this and know a lot about Ed Broadbent's impact. But if someone's waking up this morning and they're thinking, what was his contribution? Can you summarize what he meant to politics in this country?
Yeah, he was only the third leader the federal NDP ever had because it was still kind of a new party at the time that he led it. And he really expanded the NDP's reach from its base within the labor movement to make it a viable third option for a lot of middle-class Canadian voters who may not have been comfortable with the Liberals or then progressive Conservatives. He was kind of a bridge between Tommy Douglas with his prairie roots in the birth of the NDP in the CCF movement in Saskatchewan to the modern NDP of today that draws support from a wider cross-section, not just at the federal level, but also, of course, in provincial governments across the country, including Manitoba, that's repeatedly elected New Democrats. The high watermark for the NDP under Broadbent was 1988 in the election campaign when he took the party to 43 seats in the House of Commons. That was the most they'd ever had at that point and would have until 2011 when Jack Layton came along with the Orange Wave and won all those seats in Quebec. And I think a big part of their success was really good political messaging that Broadbent and his staff had developed in this period when they started talking about ordinary Canadians, trying to kind of appeal to that broad swath of voters in sort of the middle. And that at the time was kind of a new message in Canadian politics, and they had a lot of success with it. And of course, Marcy, as you know, every party now makes that pitch to ordinary voters, saying they are the party of kind of Main Street. But that was something that the NDP did kind of pioneer in the 80s.
I'll ask you more about the 70s and 80s, but first I actually want to ask you about what he was like as a person.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of his manner, first of all. He was very approachable, very affable. I got to know him a little bit because my mother had worked on his campaigns in the 1980s, so I met him a few times. And I think part of it was his contrast to the politicians at the time. He was not flashy, didn't wear expensive suits or have an expensive watch like Brian Mulroney did, and he didn't have that kind of slightly condescending patrician air that Pierre Trudeau had at the time. So people saw him as somebody that was approachable and who they kind of recognized as someone they'd like to have a beer with, even if they didn't necessarily support their politics personally. And that was something that was reflected in polling at the time. Broadbent consistently outpolled his party in terms of overall popularity.
So let's talk about his politics. If you go to the 70s and 80s, what are the policies that best exemplified Ed Broadbent as we remember him this morning? And then you can probably slide right into his biggest challenges as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, issues that we now refer to as, and I think you mentioned this in your introduction, as social justice issues. We didn't call them them back at that time, but there were certainly things that he advocated for. He probably pushed as far a party to the left on economic issues, portraying the NDP as the voice of working Canadians, fighting for not just for socialized medicine, but also better pension, labor protection for workers, and some of the social issues we take for granted today. Things like abortion rights, which were a hot-button issue in the 1970s. This is before, of course, the Supreme Court decision on the Morgentaler case. The NDP under Broadbent took a very strong position, clearly advocating for women's rights, gender equality, and what, of course, was called women's lib back in the day. His Waterloo, though, probably was in the 1988 election campaign when he ran against Brian Mulroney. Mulroney was trying to get elected to a second majority government. And the key issue in that campaign was the Canada-U.S. free trade agreement, which later became, including Mexico, became the NAFTA agreement. At the time, the NDP was really concerned it would mean jobs were going to leave the country, that Canadian jobs would be exported to the U.S. under this agreement. So he and the Liberals both ran against it. Mulroney was ultimately vindicated by voters because he goes on and wins another majority government. And the NDP kind of falls short of its goal, which was to form official opposition then. And I think that's maybe why the following year Broadbent decided, maybe it's time to let somebody else have a crack at this, because I've taken it, as far as I can go.
In Manitoba, obviously, we've now had, NDP governments and PC governments. We kind of go back and forth. We don't like minority positions. But what we've had, for years, right? NDP governments. We came out of 17 years, I think, is the right number under Selinger. Right. Now we have another NDP government. Do you think that we would be the same politically without Ed Broadbent's influence? I started by reading a quote from our premier now, Wab Kinew.
Yeah, no, I don't think you would be. I think he had an enormous effect, not just on the federal NDP, but on the provincial parties as well. Because the NDP is unusual in its structure in that the provincial parties are kind of, in the same kind of legal structure as the federal party. And so the federal party, the federal leader, I think, has, an outsized role in how the provincial parties do. And I think Broadbent made it okay for voters across the country to like New Democrats. They were, at the time in the 1970s, they were portrayed as communists, or at very least as socialists. Broadbent really changed the image, and that trickled down, I think, to provinces, certainly into Manitoba, also into Saskatchewan, British Columbia, Ontario very briefly, and also down east as well. So, it's a really good question, actually, and you're absolutely right that it had a real impact on the way people thought about the Democrats at all political levels, not just in the House of Commons.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for remembering him and his legacy this morning. Appreciate having you with us.
Thanks, sir.
Glenn McGregor, reporter in the Parliamentary Press Gallery, reached him this morning in Ottawa, remembering the former leader of the federal New Democrats, Ed Broadbent, who died yesterday at the age of 87. There's going to be more remembrances throughout the day, also from a local perspective here in Manitoba, noticing postings on Facebook this morning, including one with a whole bunch of photos from Judy Wassilishali's. So you can check out a lot of that online, and we'll likely have some more memories and people talking about the legacy of Ed Broadbent and his impact on Manitoba politics coming up on our shows through the day. Right now, though, we want to save some time before the news here. We've got a couple of minutes to talk about coyotes, because in Manitoba, reported coyote interactions, you see I'm saying it both ways because apparently both ways are acceptable, Corey. Reported interactions doubled in 2023 compared to the year before. But we asked, what have you seen? And Corey's here with comments.
Yeah, got a comment from Bill Fugler, who says, I've run into them while I'm walking near urban forests. He says, always feel lucky to see them, never had a problem. But then on the other side of things, Rick Roy wrote, and he says, seen my chocolate lab get chased back in the house by 2 coyotes in the Sandy Hook area, and he'd just make it. He had to just watch it happen, no time for nothing else but to go out there and just hope that his dog makes it back. Clearly, as we heard earlier from the expert, that's more of a rare kind of a thing to see, that kind of aggression from coyotes. Chris Aptison wrote in, on a jog recently, I came within 15 feet of a coyote on the Assiniboine River. And I know I also saw one on the Assiniboine the other day. It was right around dawn, and there was a coyote. It was chasing like a low-flying bird. It almost looked like they were playing. It was beautiful. The coyote was jumping up, like trying to get this bird. And this bird's like, yeah, no way, I can fly.
Not a good game for the bird.
Not a good game for the bird, but it seemed like maybe they were both having a weird kind of wild fun out there. So yeah, thanks for all those comments. Keep them coming on in. But and also got one call on the listener line, just to sum it up here, from Dave Tournier, who said he was fat biking through Assiniboine Park, and one kind of was just kind of tailing him the whole time, then slipped into the bush and then came back out. He found it kind of tailing him. It was kind of creepy, but also kind of cool at the same time. So.
I find it so unnerving myself. I golf early at the crack of dawn, so I see them a lot around. But read the story if you haven't yet. I know, Corey, you were lead, in looking at that story this morning. So to be clear here, this doesn't speak to the fact that populations are definitively up. We may, in fact, just have more reported sightings.
And people are just paying more attention to it and calling them in is probably what the case is. And the problems was clear when they gave us that statement. So interesting stuff. And lots of stories about coyotes all over the city.
Thanks for the comments. Thank you for the photos. And in Winnipeg, as we head into news time, -27. If you do need us still, it's late in the drive. But if you have a problem to report on the commute, 788-3093 is where you can reach Corey with any late updates here on your Friday. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is -22 in downtown Winnipeg, -27 at the airport. A cold one, a risk of frostbite throughout the day, and a high of -17. The owner of a vacant home is fighting the city of Winnipeg over a firefighting bill of more than $100,000. Maria Suzuki has been hit with 3 bills from the city for 4 fires caused by arson at her Elgin Avenue property. In 2023, the city passed a new bylaw charging the owners of empty buildings for firefighting services. But Suzuki says the city miscalculated and charged her more than 10 times as much as it should have.
My property was 1 dwelling unit times how many fire was there. So let's say if it's a four-person firefighter group, then it's going to be $2,600. So if you think as a dwelling unit for one property, then I would have been charged much, much less.
Suzuki's lawyer has written a letter to the mayor asking to plead their case at the next meeting of the property committee. A multinational force led by the U.S. and U.K. hit Houthi targets in Yemen early this morning. Houthi rebels in Yemen are condemning the strikes, as are Hezbollah and Iran. They were a response to nearly 2 months of Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The Houthis called them a show of support for Gaza during the Israel-Hamas war and vow to keep them up, echoing this earlier statement by leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi.
We are more determined to continue to target ships linked to Israel, and we will not back down from that. Our position stems from our faith. The Americans should know what that means.
Russia is requesting a UN Security Council meeting to discuss the multinational strikes, while Ottawa is not saying what Canada's role is. A statement, though, from British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says Canada provided non-operational support. The Federal Aviation Administration in the U.S. says it will increase its oversight of Boeing production and manufacturing. Today's announcement comes just one day after the FAA launched an investigation into the aeronautical company. This is all part of the fallout from last week's incident with Alaska Airlines. A flight involving a Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft was forced to make an emergency landing after losing a passenger door plug mid-flight. 2023, as we've been hearing, was a banner year for coyote sightings in Manitoba. Conservation officers logged almost 700 reports of interactions with coyotes last year, more than double the amount reported in 2022. Two of the reports involved children attacked in the North Kildonan area. Stan Garrett, director of the Urban Coyote Research Project, says you should never run away if you come across a coyote.
People should always stand their ground and, if need be somewhat aggressive toward coyotes. So that's the thing called hazing. And hazing is also an important tool for reducing the amount of habituation that might take place.
The pace of coyote sightings doesn't seem to have slowed so far in 2024, with reports of run-ins in various parts of Winnipeg and southeast Manitoba. The Winnipeg branch of the Animal Food Bank Network is busier than ever and making a plea for donations. The organization provides pet food to people in need. In the past week, it has seen twice as many requests as normal. Nicole Frey founded the network with her husband.
Talked to a couple of our clients yesterday, and one client had been diagnosed with cancer, so isn't working, and another client, her and her mom were facing homelessness, and so it's like such a mixture of reasons why I think people are accessing us.
Frey says they need donations to keep up with demand. If you would like to help, go to animalfoodbank.org. The Winnipeg Jets remain at the top of the NHL standings with a win last night against Chicago. Nikolai Ehlers' smile said it all after he scored that winning goal on TSN. Just a minute left in the game. 2-1 the final for Winnipeg, the Jets' 8th straight win. And fans are starting to believe, after posting the second lowest attendance in the NHL this season, Canada Life Centre was sold out for the second time in 4 games last night. Charles Cruz says it's exciting to know his city's home team has the league's best record.
It's awesome, the way they're going right now, they can definitely take the league and take the Stanley for sure.
Take the Stanley. Well, Cruz was at the Jet store stocking up on special gear for the Jets' second annual Filipino Heritage Game. It goes tomorrow night here in Winnipeg as the Jets face the Philadelphia Flyers. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, Megan Ketchison, and Aaron Broman out in our live news department this morning. Rounding out our live team today, big thanks to Corey and Abby, as well Travis and Brad behind the YouTube controls. Overall in our unit, those who worked on the program in current affairs this week on all of our programs. Our associate producers, huge thank you guys. Wendy Parker, Abby Adeyemi and Corey Funk, Bruce Layden, Issa Kickson, Nolan Kaler, Nadia Kidwai, Marjorie Dalhouse, Sierra Sanders, Dylan Longhurst, May McKillop, Daniel Friesen, Chidi Akuma, and Kalkadan Mulugeta, as well as Brittany Greenslade, who did some guest hosting. And our community reporter in unit is Shannalee Vidal. YouTube producers, as mentioned, Travis Peterson and Brad Lillies. Nellie Gonzalez is the show's producer in the current affairs unit, and Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. Thank you, everybody. We're almost at the end of the show. Abby, what do you want to say about weather?
I'll tell you, Winnipeg, it's clear, it's cold. That's all I can tell you, because there's a cold warning north and southern part of the province. That's the summary. It's going to be a cold weekend.
100%. Bundle up, get ready. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good one. Corey Funk?
Richard called southbound Plessis at Ravelston. There's a car in the center lane blocking it. No hazards on or anything. Looks kind of abandoned, so keep right to get around that. May cause a little bit of backups on southbound Plessis. Thanks to everyone who gave us a call this morning.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We are at the end of our show for this Friday morning. We hope you join us again on Monday for Information Radio here on CBC, and stick around through the day, radio noon and up to speed between 3 and 6 with more local programming from here in Manitoba. If you have any feedback on the show, you love it, you loathe it, you think there's things that we could be doing consistently better, we want to hear from you. We're your public broadcaster. Call us on the listener line, 788-3205. Take care. Bundle up. We'll talk to you on Monday. Have a good weekend.